and welcome to the latest edition of the Gutsy Podcast. As always, a big thanks to everyone who is tuning in, watching, listening, sharing, commenting. Most importantly, the feedback has been phenomenal. We've got so many fantastic guests coming up as well. So many fantastic guests been on and sharing their stories and really inspiring, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think it's fair to say we're loving the experience, but we're loving that you guys out there are loving the experience, and I'm going to love the experience of speaking to today's guest. Welcome to the Gutsy Podcast, Mark Brown. How are we doing, Mark?
Very well, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, and it's great to get you on. We had to speak to your agent and battle through Laura. Laura's Mark's wife. Ever suffering?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So, Mark, I think this is, for me personally, dead interesting. So I hope that carries off. I have no doubt that will carry off, because you're coming into Gutsy today with lots of different heads on, so to speak, lots of different hats.
Yeah.
You've got lived experience.
Yeah.
With inflammatory bowel disease. You've got parent experience with inflammatory bowel disease, and you've got your purpose, very much as, and it's quite hard to quantify you, I think, because you're so many things. Life coach, motivational speaker, storyteller.
Yeah,
I can relate to that.
Yeah,
I can relate to that.
Stories for a living. Yeah,
yeah, good stories. Yeah. So. Again, welcome on board. Great to have you. And I think there'll be a lot of people out there know who you are. A lot of people don't. So tell us a bit about yourself.
So, as you said, my name's Mark Brown. I run a program, and I suppose for want of a better expression, it falls under the kind of the banner of personal development, self-help. But your introduction there is actually quite specific, because I absolutely do I facilitate programs. The motivational speaker bit's quite interesting, because I think people's definition of motivation can vary, and I think for me is I am a passionate speaker. I speak about what I'm interested in. I speak very passionately about the program, and more importantly, the people that I get to work with. If people leave feeling motivated from that, that's great. But it's not really my intention. My intention is always, I suppose when I think about my business plan and starting this all these years ago, was if you can leave people in better condition than you found them, that's a good purpose. That's something that's a life worth living,
Absolutely. And I think, we can definitely, that resonates with me, because when I started the Derek McEwan Foundation many moons ago, one of the first questions that somebody asked me was, why are you doing it? And I said, well, I just want to help people that went through that, the terrible experience that my mum went through, and if we can help them, have a better life in some way, shape or form, not knowing how to do that at that point, then you've that's your purpose.
Yeah.
And it's very, very clear that you've got one. And as we delve much deeper, we'll start to understand why and how and all.
Get into the guts.
Yeah, literally. So I think it makes sense to me that we start off with your lived experience with inflammatory bowel disease, because when your journey, when we first met, maybe a couple of years ago or so, it took me aback, in many ways, not just the journey, but how you dealt with it and started to manage your condition and how manage it in a very positive manner in the main. I'd be fair to say, and I just found it quite fascinating, truth be told.
Yeah.
So let's go right back to the start then, Mark. So how old are you?
At this moment, I'm 45.
How old were you? Round about diagnosis?
13, 14.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I'm a little bit vague about it, there is, and I am going to come to this, because I've been asked a few times, how many years have you had this? Quite often the question is, how many years have you suffered this? And the words of that are really, really important, because at that, like right now on this day at this time, I have it. I'm not suffering from it.
Yeah.
And there is something that I'll kind of come to that later on. But diagnosis happened sort of, so 13, 14, but kind of, 93, 94, sort of early to mid 90s was when I got diagnosed. After having, I'd had symptoms from quite a young age, from a good bit before that, because I used to have unexplained and prolonged sore stomachs that would often be kind of played off as, and this is a well-known story in the IBD community, and I've heard people say it in the previous podcasts when they talk about pre-diagnosis, but I used to have sore stomachs that I kind of felt, I get that young people have sore stomachs, I get it can be something you've eaten, I get it can be a bug and all the rest of it, but mine would last longer. And I used to think, and weirdly I would kind of think to myself, I think this is sorer than what you've had, because it did feel, I thought, this just doesn't feel, I had a kind of
felt a bit different.
I had an inner intuition at a very young age thinking, this doesn't feel just like a sore stomach. But what I will say, Derek, is I was also self-confessed hypochondriac from a very young age. And I say that to some people, and people that don't know me, they'll laugh. If my mum and dad were sitting here, they'd be like, oh, fuck, he was definitely a hypochondriac, to the point, and although this is funny and I'm a tiny bit embarrassed about it, but even to the point where if Casualty came on a Saturday, that soundtrack and those flashing blue lights, I was upstairs. So
you're one of the people in our fine country that's delighted that it's not on our screens anymore.
Well, the thing is, now I'm fine with it. Unfortunately, I've spent an inordinate amount of time in the hospital the last couple of years, which again I'll come to in a moment. But my hypochondria was quite debilitating, to the point where I was so fearful of hospitals, I was petrified of surgery. Illness just, and I don't really know where it came from. That's
what I was going to ask you. Do you know, is there something happened early on in your life that's given you that? Because I know for years I was petrified of the dentist, but I can relate that back to a bad experience. I'm okay now, by the way.
Well, there is, more often than not, when there is a response like that, there is a trigger for it.
Yeah.
My mum worked in the NHS. My mum was a nurse for all of her working life, but there was just something about. There was something about the fear of illness, the fear of being really ill, the fear of being operated on, and I was also sort of labelled as a born warrior. I was told, and I was a warrior. I would worry about everything as a child. I would worry about starting school. I'd worry about what's it like going to high school. I would worry about illness. I would worry, am I ever going to get a bird? I would worry a whole bunch of stuff. But worry to a point where whereas worry often starts in the head, but we feel it in our stomach. So there is obviously the irrefutable connection between brain and gut, and from a very young age, that had a massive impact on me. And actually, there was points that I remember, even as a teenager, I would go through short periods of time where I wasn't worrying about anything, but then I'd be thinking to myself, why are you not worrying?
I should be worried about something.
And it's probably why I've ended up doing the job that I do, because I've had to work. And by the way, I'll say this just now. People that know me well know that if they knew a version of me before, that I was a chronic worrier and an overreactor, a catastrophizer. It's not that I get it right now. It's that I do put a fair amount of work into it, and I teach this stuff. And when you teach something, that gets stronger in yourself. So I'm very much a work in progress with this stuff. But I've been doing it a long time.
I think we're all a work in progress to a certain extent. Well, to a full extent.
Absolutely. Well, even people that put themselves out there as gurus,
I'm very wary of them.
I'm dubious of gurus and dubious of masters.
Quite rightly so. Because as soon as you start telling yourself that and putting yourself out as that,
So what have you then got to learn? If you've mastered something, where do you go from there?
You should always be learning, shouldn't you?
Completely,
shouldn't you? I think that's a dangerous precedent to that people do, especially in this. I think especially in the modern world, the modern society, where it goes back to that. Everybody will be famous for 15 minutes. The old Andy Warhol quote. Now everybody can be anything they want because they've got the tools online. Funnily enough, Gutsy Podcast maybe being one of them to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
But it's how people push that on.
Yeah.
And it's like, people that have got, I think it's quite frightening. People that have got, I spoke to Jen Wilson on the Gutsy podcast a while ago about this, and it was about the magic pill. People are selling magic pills, and like they become they're gurus in this and gurus in that. But when you get under the bonnet, they're gurus in nothing. But people buy into it, and you can elevate them. I think
because they want hope. It comes from a place of hope usually.
Yeah, aye, definitely. But it's super dangerous.
Yeah,
it's super dangerous, and because you've got the modern world, you've got a platform to push that out in.
That's it.
It's like if you get your audience. I mean, just need to look, what was that guy? The Jake Paul guy. Yeah, he's got this incredible audience. Gazillions of people online, and he's carved this persona for himself, and
he's got. And do you know what? When I watch him, when I listen to him, there's a bit of me going, I wonder what he's like when he's not being watched. I wonder what he's like when the door closes and it's just him, because he's got a language thing that I hear sometimes when there's a massive amount of bravado. It's a bit of it's a kind of pseudo bravado.
It's colossal,
and I'm kind of going, I bet you've got just as many, if not more, insecurities, which is why all this circus is around you. Because you see that in people all the time. And one of the things when I'm running programs, particularly with teenagers who often, when I ask them a question at first, they'll look left and right for validation, or they'll look left and right to see, is that all right to say this? Because I don't want to have the piss taken out of me. And I get that. I completely get it. But when they start to think for themselves, one of the questions I ask through the program is this idea of, who do you choose to be when you're not being watched? And it's a really interesting thing if people actually, muse over that or think about that, or they really get into that idea of, so when I'm not with my pals, when I'm not being someone's partner or parent or whatever it is, what is the real version of me? And that's a lot of the work that I've had to do, because that magic pill bit is, we kind of already, without getting too spiritual too soon, we kind of have the magic pill in us. This doesn't really come from somewhere else, It was like in The Matrix when Neo went to meet the Oracle. He went there for all the answers in that scene. Neo was told by everyone, "You're the one. You're going to save the world. You're going to do this." And he went to the Oracle, and she was like, so go away and think about it. And he had to realise it for himself. It's like what I spend, most of my life working in schools, and I get to work with incredible young people all the time. I get to work with incredible teachers and adults, but there's this bit that I noticed, that so many people say, you've got so much potential, and it's a lot of pressure to put on a young person, because with the highest level of respect, it means nothing until they see it for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like when you're healing from something like IBD, is that you can have doctors telling you one thing and parents telling you another thing, and actually until you decide that how you're going to manage it, and you manage it with all these people around you. And I'll be really, really clear in that, although I've got a very spiritual outlook in life, and the spiritual stuff and the scientific stuff, when they go hand in hand, you're really stacking the odds in your favour. So you have to listen to people, but you also have to make up your own mind.
And but also people get that at different points in life. People can get be in that position where they understand their potential. They maybe get an understanding who they are, where they're, what their skill set is, and they get comfortable with that, and then they can build on that and progress. And for some people that happens early in life, and some people that happens much later in life. And sometimes you kind of bound about till you really get that.
Absolutely.
But going back to your early diagnosis, you're kind of 13, 14, you've had numerous, shall we say, stomach issues for periodically for a while that you just felt were different. And even for your self-confessed hypochondria, that just felt that, it wasn't just a something you thought was there. It was a reality.
It was a reality. Do you know, I remember, I'm going to try and be quite specific about this, but I remember being 13 and one day watching a movie. I can't remember what the movie was called, but I met Ted Danson was in it, and he looks after his elderly father. And there's a scene in that movie where...
Cheers, Ted Danson.
Ted Danson from Cheers. And this would have been kind of post-Cheers, maybe finished up in the early 90s, whatever. So he was in this movie. There's a bit in the movie where Ted Danson's dad shouts him through to the toilet, and he says, I'm sorry to ask, could you come through? And Ted Danson looks down the toilet and there's blood there. And as the movie transpires, the dad has got early signs of bowel cancer. Now, I caught this, and it's a weird thing. So you're probably going back about 32 years. I saw this movie. That bit sticks with me. And what I remember was thinking, that's terrible. You know, blood in the toilet equals cancer. So I could very, very quickly. I was that much of a catastrophizer and overthinker that I could take something and make my own story out of it and put layers on it to something quite horrific quite quickly.
Yeah, but that's quite easy to do, and some people are, some people naturally do that. So, that in that case, the blood in the toilet for you led to cancer in your mind. But that's quite simple to do, because that can lead somewhere, and there's a. But it can also, it's a real rabbit hole.
It can also, and I'll come to this in a moment. But it can also come to that bit of, we can manifest this stuff when we think about something often enough. And I'll come back to that story in a second. But what I often, when I'm working with teachers, a lot of teachers have been really intrigued about how I engage young people, particularly difficult young people, or young people that are deemed challenging or out with classroom control. And nobody's really out with classroom control, in my own opinion, by the way. But how you listen to people and how you inquire and how you...
I know, I went to school with a right few maniacs.
I've probably met a few over the years. But there is something about... what I'll do, I'm going to come back to that story in a second, because the important bit for me is with that movie clip. I'm bouncing about, I apologise, but it kind of popped in at my head that I hadn't finished that. But the thing about that movie was, because I could so quickly catastrophise, it was within about 6 months of seeing that movie that I first noticed blood. And I remember when that happened, it was like, that's it. I'm 13, 14. I'm going, it's cancer. And I actually hid it. I didn't tell my mum and dad for a wee while. And part of it was because there was a wee bit of me which was worried about this might be played off as you're over worrying, you're overthinking. That was a possibility. And the other part of it was not wanting to admit it. It was almost that kind of ambivalence, because it'll just go away kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a natural thing to kind of. I'm not saying dismiss. That dismiss is the wrong word, but certainly kind of, but maybe not admitting it to yourself. Certainly not saying it to your parents, and it's something that I've heard over the years. I remember a story that at one of our family days, and what we quite often do at a family day is we'll put the kids, no matter what, we'll put the kids of a certain age group all together, and we'll do workshops and so on and so forth, and that works great. And we'll take the parents away, because you'll get different conversations, and the parents will say things during their time that they wouldn't say in front of their kids, and vice versa, and it's really beneficial. That's
absolutely,
that's the bottom line.
Absolutely,
absolutely. And I always, a story that really sticks in my head was that the parents were finding underwear hidden behind the drawer, that had blood in it. Mm-hmm. And obviously they eventually had the conversation, but the way that it went was that the kid was obviously embarrassed by it, but very, very scared by it. And because they were scared by it, they brought it within themselves, so they didn't want to speak about it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that they didn't want to do was worry their parents.
Absolutely.
This kid didn't want to worry the parents.
Yeah.
But the parents had found them, and they were the same. They didn't. Relatively young parents, as far as I remember, and. So there was almost like a standoff of no saying anything, until they eventually did, but both sides of that, the kid and the parent, both thought the same as where you went to.
Absolutely.
They directly went to cancer.
Yeah.
Catastrophising it.
Yeah.
But you cannot blame them for that, because that's scary stuff.
It is absolutely. And the thing about, one of the things that I work on and share in the programs on, particularly with parents, is when we start to think about how we react to things, because more often than not always, by the way, so I'm not generalising this, but there's stimulus and there's response, and there's this gap in the middle where we get to choose how we're going to react. Now, my reasons at the time, I remember thinking to myself, the very first time that I noticed blood, one of the things was, I had a million things going through my mind. One was I was a hypochondriac, and I think the other bit is I was dead before I was 15. That was what I thought. This is going to get you quick, Marco. And but I also thought about, I didn't want to worry my parents.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I worried about their reaction.
Yeah.
So it was worry. And eventually, I can't remember how long it took me, but eventually I'd said to my mum, I've been at the toilet and I'm passing blood. And my mum's reaction was, her reaction was okay. I mean, she's been a nurse for her whole life, and it was quite a pragmatic approach. It was like, oh, that is that, and you could experience a bit of the concern, but then it was we went to the doctors, and the first thing, because this was kind of like the early to mid 90s, it was at that time, it really wasn't common in someone so young. It really wasn't. And so much so that, and I'll try not to skip about too much, but I ended up in the infectious disease ward of Monklands because they didn't know what it was. Whereas now they would go, actually, they would say, actually, there's a good chance it's that, so we'll send you there. But it was a bit of an unknown, the fact that I was a young teenager showing symptoms of this. So it took a few months, I think, for diagnosis, which actually still is relatively quick, although I'd had years and years of stomach pain and some joint pain as well. Joint pain was a huge symptom for me.
There you go.
But after...
We know that's an added joy of inflammatory bowel disease, don't we?
We certainly do now, absolutely. But I went through weeks and weeks of trying this. This is, it may be a cut, it could be a fissure, it could be a this, it could be a that. And then I was like, I can't go to school because I couldn't really walk to school because I was exhausted. My hips and my knees were sore. I was struggling to walk up the stairs, and I was kind of going, surely it's not right to feel this dizzy when you wake up, and when you go to bed and stuff, and severe exhaustion. And eventually a doctor came in, and I really don't know the timeline. There is a reason I don't know the timeline, which I will tell you about later on. It's how I've framed the story as how I live my life now. But one of the things that was really interesting is the doctor had said, right, we're going to, you categorically are going to need a blood transfusion. We need to get you into hospital. I really don't know what this is. So it was an infectious disease ward in Monklands.
That must have been a joy.
Well, as someone that couldn't even watch fucking Casualty,
I know, that's kind of what I was getting to.
And I remember thinking it was actually like living out one of my worst nightmares, because there was three things happened in that day that I thought, I can't believe this is happening. But what I do remember is actually very quickly going, you're going to need to grow up. You need to stop being such a wee whatever, and this hypochondria thing isn't serving you well. You're actually going to have to deal with this. That was kind of my inner chat. But I went into the hospital.
But that's quite a conversation, because you're actually recognising how bad this hypochondria is.
I recognised how debilitating it was, and I also had an idea of what was coming next. But I went into the hospital and I saw the hospital bed, and I'm like, you've never wanted to be in one of them, And then it was, we need you to take your clothes off and put a gown on, but one of the worst things they said, that
very flattering,
very flattering,
very flattering, very flattering.
One of the things that this nurse, I remember her name was Norma. One of the things that Nurse Norma had says is she's lying in the bed and
I don't know why I find that funny.
Well, actually, the other nurses called her Naughty Norma. No idea why. But I actually got to really like her because she was probably the equivalent, not in job wise, but when I think personality wise, nowadays she reminds me of Vicky, of Vicky Garrick, where she's like.
What, or even lunatic?
Born to work with children.
All right, that's not how I would have put it.
But I say that for there is, and you'll know this even better than I do. But my children have sat with her, and I've met her a few times. But there is a way that she can make you feel, which balances out the theory and practice really, really well.
Yeah.
And it can leave you feeling optimistic and looked after, and more importantly, listened to. So I was sitting in this hospital bed, and then my mum's looking at me, and I can see the look in her face, and I'm sitting there going, well, here we fucking are, this is my worst nightmare. But it got even worse, because the woman then said to my mum, so visiting finishes in 15 minutes, you'll need to go.
Oh. So
you weren't allowed, so in those days you weren't allowed to have a parent stay with you no matter what, but also because it was the infectious disease ward. So I was like, So not only am I living, I'm here, I'm on my own, and my mummy's got to go, you know, that kind of thing.
Of course, right.
So I was in, the first time I was in hospital for about 2.5, 3 weeks the first time. Got the diagnosis, interestingly was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis first, and then very, very long story, it's what this first of all said ulcerative colitis, and then maybe a couple of years later had inflammation further round in other places. Oh, we think it's Crohn's, and it's bounced back between that over the years, so it's been different over the years. I have it in my head it's IBD, and it's treated accordingly. But it's definitely
they've not made a definitive.
Well, they've made. What's funny is they've made it was definitively colitis, then definitively Crohn's, and then definitively colitis again. And there's it kind of weaves in and out as you read this 30-year story in my file.
Yeah.
But how you view that's really important, and again, that's what I'll get to as we can get into this conversation. But that was, you know, I think this is true, but at the time, you know, I had 2 or 3 different consultants looking after me. A gentleman called Dr. Holden was one of the first GI doctors that I had the kind of long-term relationship with, and what he'd said at the time was, or what I was picking up from, it felt like it was either steroids or surgery. That was kind of going back that amount of time, steroids or surgery.
Still not really that uncommon, is it?
Yeah, anti-inflammatories, that kind of thing. We didn't have biologics at that point, weren't out. We didn't have, I don't think we had Salifoc. We were only just getting Asacol, you know, all-salazine, sulfasalazine, all these kind of things were, some of them were just out. But I was quite quickly put onto steroids. And I had a lot of inflammation. I mean, it was pretty, I remember it was, at the time, it was very, very severe. Got a blood transfusion, was out of hospital within, I think I was in for 3 weeks the first time.
Really?
Because they couldn't get it under control, you know.
Right. Yeah, of course.
And again, what was going on up here for me in my mind, as a warrior and living in this wee room. I had a black and white telly in my room. It makes me sound dead old, but that was all they had, a wee black and white telly.
Was it when you had to turn the dial?
It was the dial one with the screen would actually, and it makes me sound older than I am, but it just seemed to be what they had.
You've lied about your age. You've lied.
He's actually 52 and he's had a difficult paper round. But we got out of hospital, and so it'd be second or third year in high school, and I kind of had to get, but I'd missed so much school, and the chat at school was very much, well, he's going to have to repeat a year, and I was very much, fuck that's not going to happen. So I went in knowing that I wasn't going to do well, and I had a lot to pick up on. There was a bit of me going, I can't have. This is where the victim bit kind of kicked in. I can't have this illness, and can't feel like this, and can't be in steroids, and have to go back and be with the people a year younger than me. And I hated school anyway. I really did. It's why I do the job that I do now, is because I didn't like school, because I felt they weren't teaching me what I wanted to learn. Do you know? And there was a way people were with me as well, which I always kind of struggled with. So, you know, got out of hospital, normal life kind of more or less resumed. But now having to take tablets every day, and having to, as a teenager, having to take enemas and suppositories and all this kind of stuff, and
what a pleasure,
and having to go back, and knowing that I was going to have to get colonoscopies and all that kind of stuff.
So what if you don't mind me asking, what knowing your your severe lack of love for the hospital environment. Yeah. I mean, how are you thinking then? You're like. So have you been made aware? So you've been diagnosed at the time of UC. You've got, after 3 weeks, which must have been horrendous for anybody, but absolutely horrendous for anybody who's absolutely petrified the hospital in the first place. And you're at this point, is it in your mind that this is lifelong? Is that, have they hit you with that?
Yeah.
Said, well, is it sank in? Because to me that means that, in my mind, if somebody said that to me, then I'm kind of trying to put myself in your shoes badly at the moment, but that means you're in and out of that hospital environment the rest of your days.
Yeah, I mean, it did sink in. It did sink in quite early on, but I'm not entirely sure. In fact, let me get this right. I was going to say I'm not entirely sure why I did what I did quite early, but I think it comes from what I mean by that is there was a bit of me kind of going, it's not that I didn't believe it, because the words that were said, the words that the consultant said to me before I left was, this is a lifelong condition. there was two things he says. It's a lifelong condition, and the chances are you're going to need surgeries down the line. And I think I kind of blocked that out a little bit. I heard it and understood it. I had the intelligence to understand that this is an intelligent man. He's seen this before. And I was there was a bit of me kind of going, right, I hear that, okay. And the third thing he said was what really kind of floored me, because he said, this really can be a stress-related illness. And when he said that, I remember looking at my mum and going, this is terrible, because you know how I'm a born warrior.
You brought it on yourself.
And I brought it on myself. Another thing about this, the thing about being a born warrior is that nobody is a born warrior. That is categorically, it's not possible. We're not born worried. Don't get me wrong, there is a small but significant, some people can be born into trauma. Some people can be born into chaos, depending on what the family lifestyle is. But we don't come out going, oh, I'm worried. More often than not, we come out, and once things have settled, you're in a state of bliss for quite a while.
Yeah, you're a product of your environment in many ways, aren't you?
Absolutely. So this bit about being a born warrior, it did get me thinking about, and I tell this I'm guilty of this as well as a parent, by the way, but I talk this in the parents programme, is that we do lie to our children. And I don't mean facetiously to dupe them or anything, but we do lie to them about things which we think is for the greater good. And an example of that is Santa.
No, we could go really deep here, but we don't want to offend a lot of people. But there's loads of lies.
Well, there is. But we tell people certain things at a certain age. And I remember, I think when I was told by family members, or you're a born warrior, or I would hear my reputation from other people sometimes. Mark's a wee warrior, and I remember thinking to myself, if I'm a born warrior, and if I have a condition which is brought on by worry, I'm pretty fucked. That was what I thought. Yeah, but that's it. It's
you've putting the pieces together, and it's an easy thing to come out.
Yeah.
But if you're surrounded by that narrative, then you'll start to believe that narrative. Then it's not just people telling you, you'll be telling yourself. And the more that you tell yourself.
And it is the most basic but powerful bit of psychology, is that whether you tell someone something or whether you tell yourself, if you tell them it often enough in the right way, they will eventually believe it.
Yeah.
And when you start to believe something, you start to act like that. And it's one of the things I started to say earlier, is that I often say that to teachers, is that you have to be really careful how you label someone. Because if you tell someone that they're a grade A student and they're going to do well and they're going to do this, and you put all the right stuff around them, chances are that'll manifest and it'll come true. But unfortunately, the opposite is exactly true. If you tell someone you're a numpty, you're no as smart as your brother, you're not going to, and the thing is, this does happen when people say, get out my classroom, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. You will have the straw that broke the camel's back, and that child will eventually believe that. And that's something that's been created. It's not that that's how they are. So when I left the hospital with the information in my wee pamphlet, that's what I kind of got, my wee thing in IBD, and it was very much, you have it for life. You'll likely need surgeries. These are the only treatments, and it's stress related. So I kind of went off armed with just that.
It's quite a statement to say to actually just put it's stress related there, because so many things as we're getting to understand, and just to pile that one on. Is that the thing that you pulled out from it yourself, or was it lots of other things within that information?
I think that's probably what I pulled out from it, because there was a lot of stuff around it, and what I quickly, I think between the age of 13 and 16, had been on steroids a few times, had been for several colonoscopies, it never really settled, and there was I think it was not long after my 16th birthday, I went in and had a colonoscopy done, and the doctor had come out and he said, like, steroids aren't quite hitting it, you've been on this other treatment. He says, there's a really significant amount of inflammation in this part. He says, if we can't get it settled this time, he says, and his exact words were, it's going to have to come out. And I actually remember that it's going to have to come out was like, I was even more, having dealt with the kind of stress and anxiety, and felt like I was a kind of case of anxiety for quite a few years and wasn't quite managing it. And that was the first time they mentioned a bag. That was the first time they'd mentioned what it would look like because of, the significant inflammation. And, he says, you're living your life in the toilet, Mark. He says, you're 30, 40 times a day in the toilet.
Wow.
And even my mum would say, it's 30, 40 times a day in the toilet, but when he's not in the toilet, he's thinking about
the toilet.
And we there was a couple of times where he'd been on holiday and I had flare-ups, and it's like when you're on holiday, it's obviously tricky to manage. So it was round about this point where they talked about surgery for the first time, and I remember going to visit my gran, an incredible woman called, her name was Barbara Finlay. My gran got diagnosed with, I believe it was lymphatic leukemia. I can't remember how old she would have been. She lived with it for years and years, and that's not what ended her life in the end. But my gran was the first person that used to talk about things like Reiki. Now, back in the 90s, when you spoke about Reiki, you would talk about Reiki with a wee smile, thinking, "What's that voodoo pish?" And it's a bit Eastern.
I think some people still say that. To be honest,
sometimes they do, but the thing is that you cannot argue with scientific evidence, and you can't argue with energy. There's some things that we now have proof of. So my gran had said, you've tried all this, you've tried all that, and we'd been down the homeopath route, and we'd tried various alternative kind of things. But my gran had said,
so what alternative things did you try?
So there was even things like there was various even things like some of the herbal teas that were just coming out, and then there was lots of kind of root. There was one thing in particular. There was a couple of homeopathic remedies. A couple of homeopathic doctors in Edinburgh and Glasgow that had put themselves out as gurus, and it was like the non-medical treatment stuff. But what did I suffered from that thing called hope. So I went to see them, and my mum and dad were great because they were like they pay a lot of money for these things. It was like £80 a consultation to come away with a wee bag of arnica or whatever it was. And again, I'd be taking them with that hope, and there's a bit of me going, even if it's placebo, I'll fucking take placebo, But
because there's a level of desperation, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that hope. But I mean, we're not saying this for everybody, so please don't think it is. But I think it's really, really scary, and it's almost like it's predatory. I mean, these guys are, there's a lot of the old phrase, the snake oil salesman kicking about.
You can make a lot of money off hope. You really can. And
absolutely.
And the thing for me is that we tried this, we were trying all this homeopathy stuff, and my gran had said to me, like, she was going to the exact thing was an alternative healing festival at the Assembly Rooms in Edinburgh. And I was kind of like, in for a penny, gran, I'm feeling rubbish anyway. So we went.
Yeah.
We went to this.
Might get involved in some of your voodoo, granny.
But what I found interesting was there's a bit of me going. My gran's was living with leukemia. You would never have known it to talk to her, to look at her, because she worked. She worked with the pre-fives and social work in Strathclyde back in the 80s. Had a very strong reputation. Even in 2024, Derek, I can mention my gran's names in certain circles of people a certain age, and they will still talk about the impact that she had with the work she was doing in the 80s.
Incredible.
And the early 90s. But she had heard about this thing, Reiki, and had been a few times, and she got a lot from it. And I was kind of like, can I really affect someone by no touching them and giving them stuff? That was my belief at the time. But I went to this alternative healing festival at this, and I say that with sarcasm at the moment, not knowing that actually it was going to lead me down a rabbit hole, which actually probably leads me to doing the work that I do now in many ways. And there was lots of these. I'm smiling when I say this because I remember looking around going, "The fuck is this?" It was like someone was, every single person that ran a stall. It was like they were dressed like a fucking lava lamp. They were all spiritual and floaty, and selling crystals and incense sticks. Now.
It sounds as if you've been transported to 1967.
If you come into my office just now, two things you'll see in the desks are crystals and incense sticks. But when I went in there, my gran says, like, there's a man over there who I know, and he's what's called a Reiki master. And I'm like, so he's a master, he's a guru. And my gran says, look, she says, son, you're potentially going to have a massive part of your colon taken out in next month. Try anything.
Yeah.
That was her thing. She also said something to me, and I've heard this three times since. My gran said to my gran had said, you need to remember, son, the body is built to heal itself.
Yeah.
The body is actually designed to heal itself. And again, I'm going to come to that in a second. Once I'd met this guy, this guy he had a book, and it was called The Art of Self-Healing. That was what the book was called, and there was a wee picture in the front of it of this little shadow of someone, and it was actually the cover of the book that got me, because the shadow of the book had a little red ball in the stomach, not like a not blood coloured, but a kind of orangey red kind of thing, and it was supposed to be exuding healing. That was the design of the cover.
Sounds like E.T.
See if you'd see it, that's exactly what you think of. You can tell we're products of the 80s, But I looked at the book and I thought, I wonder what this is about. And I said to the guy, what's this about? And the guy said, and this man says to me, it's about people like you. It's about people, and actually, if you look,
did he know about you?
He didn't know about me.
Oh.
But I looked at the time. I was as white as a sheet. I was very, very skinny. I had the big things under my eyes. I think I had a plastered arm from bloods the day before, kind of thing. And he says, it's about people like you. And I was like, righto. And he says, have you heard of Reiki before? And I was like a wee bit dismissive, and going, my granny talks about it. And he says, do you want to experience it? And I was like, aye, all right. So he took me behind this screen. My gran was there, and I got this wee kind of like a taster of it. And I do remember thinking to myself, that does, like, how does that work? So
but it's like, see in your mind that I have had a Reiki experience once in my life, admittedly once in my life, and I thought it was odd. Right, and the reason why I thought it was odd is because I was questioning myself.
Yeah.
And I kind of was told what to believe or expect, but I was naturally really questioning that.
And so you should.
And I am 1,000,000%. But then I was going, am I feeling that? I'm not sure. Is that? I think so. No. And you know what? To this day, I still don't know if I did.
Yeah.
But I don't think I gave it a chat. There wasn't really a reason for me doing it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it usually comes from, people are usually looking for something, more of something or less of something, like more focus, more clarity, more comfort, less pain, less discomfort, that kind of thing. But I had this little 15-minute kind of, almost like a kind of whistle-stop tour of Reiki, and I'm not going to lie, I did think to myself, it's all right. It was better than I thought. It was better than I thought. It was kind of like being massaged without being touched. That was the one thing, and I couldn't quite explain it because I thought I was by no means a scientist, but there was a bit of me going, you shouldn't be able to feel something if someone's not touching you, but I could feel
that
an
makes
intensity to it.
sense, doesn't it?
I was also quite vulnerable and looking for anything as well.
Of course.
So we did lots of little things in this kind of, spoke to a few people. My gran, bought a few things, and she brought me some incense sticks and a wee healing crystal, because that was going to sort everything,
You've still got it?
I do still have it, yeah. But I went home and I started reading this book, and I wasn't really a reader. It's one of the things that, I like to read stories, but not stuff that was going to feel like homework. But I read this book, and what was interesting is it talked about the evidence of how a body can heal itself. And then having heard my gran say that thing about the body's actually designed to heal itself. If you fall, if you break your arm, and it gets reset, your body is designed that the cells will reattach, the muscle will form around it, and it'll be as good as new, sometimes better. The same as if you cut yourself. If you look after it, if you keep it clean and you don't touch it, you don't pick it, you don't, it will heal itself. And actually, what my gran says is, and your insides are a bit like that. But I remember challenging people. Had this conversation, with before. I would kind of challenge it and not fully believe that, and go, yeah, but IBD is autoimmune. Because there was a bit of me going, I'm educating myself now. I'm going, IBD is autoimmune, which means the body, although it's designed to look after itself, unfortunately, we get this unfortunate autoimmune thing, which means the body attacks itself. But then I started hearing this bit about, going, well, actually, that is true, but that doesn't mean that what it's attacking can't defend itself. So I started to get, I don't want to, give you, anecdotal story after anecdotal story, Derek, but at 16, I read that book, pretty much learned how to meditate with that book, learned a few kind of, techniques that would actually go, how do you stop the panic signal going from the brain to the stomach. How do you actually live your life by facts and do things like a body scan to know actually, is it pain or is it just what I'm used to? Is it manageable? What number is it at? How can you get that down? So I started to read about this, and then by the time and that significant part was I was learning to meditate. I'd had Reiki. My gran had taken me somewhere else to actually get, Reiki done. My mum and dad were taking me to various places, whatever I said, I was really lucky because I would say things like, there's someone else here, could we go and see this person? And it was like, they just wanted to look after me, obviously.
To find a solution,
find a solution. That was going to work for you. We weren't at that time getting any answers really from the doctors apart from, it's medicine, and if this doesn't work this time, we're going to, it's going to be surgery. So the date of it hadn't been penciled in for surgery. It was almost like it was just if it's not this, we're going to decide when we're going to do it.
Okay.
And I went back about 2 months after that experience that I had gone to that alternative healing festival. I went in, and the doctor had said, so we're going to do a scope, and what he said was, we need to figure out what we're going to focus on with it, with this next stage.
Yeah.
And when I was kind of wheeled back into the room and put my clothes on and sat with him, and he actually said, what have you been doing? And I was a bit of me going, fuck, I've made it worse.
Fair enough.
But he says, what have you been doing? And I says, not much. I says, I hadn't been back at school, and I've stopped taking that because you told me to stop taking that, and I'm still taking that. And he says, look, I'm going to tell you. He says, you're looking a lot better. And I mean a lot better. He says, you had a massive % of your colon was severely inflamed, and he says, and there's a bit of kind of mild scarring there now. He says, it's really, really quick. In his words, he says, I haven't seen it that often. He said, so just do what you're doing, and we'll see you back in a couple of months. But I'm not saying it's not going to come back aggressively. There was always that kind of caveat of,
yeah, but I think that's sensible, because it's managing, to a certain extent, it's managing expectations, isn't it? Because his experience is, it sounds to me as if he's at this point pretty surprised with what he's seeing.
He was so much,
or not seeing, as the case may be.
Well, that was it. But I remember one of the things he'd said to me, he says, so he just doing everything the same. But the only thing that I told him that was different was I said, I've been doing a bit of meditation. I'm trying to kind of calm things down a bit, and I've had Reiki. And when I said Reiki, he didn't roll his eyes, but he kind of went, oh, like that thing. And I was...
Yeah, but a high percentage of clinicians absolutely still have that reaction.
Well, this is it. We later had a conversation, and I think about 4 years after this, just before he had retired. So I think he retired when I was kind of 19, 20 years old, and he'd been my IBD consultant since the beginning. And of course, me being me, I was worried. He leaves, I get ill. I'm going to have to go through all this again. But I remember one of the final things I had with him, and one of the final appointments I had with him, and I think he did tell me that it would be our last appointment. And at that time, I was doing quite well. I hadn't been in steroids for a couple of years. I was feeling quite good. I'd finished school. I'd actually become a dad. I was a dad at 17. That's another. Maybe we'll come to that later on. But a lot of significant things had happened.
That's quite significant.
It's very significant. But in the point of, I remember him telling me, being a parent's really stressful. You might have a flare up, and I'm like, oh, there's just another thing that happened. And it was one of the last conversations we had, and he says, do you still do your Reiki? And I was like, yeah.
Did you do that?
Yeah.
Did you do the?
But it's what led me to ask. It was what led me to get into this conversation, and I knew him well enough that I could have a quick conversation about this. And I said, do you not believe in Reiki and energy and stuff? And he says, it's just. I think the analogy that he'd had was this idea of, he says, if I cut you open, Mark, I'm not going to find meridian and chakra and all that kind of stuff. And I was kind of like, so you need to see something to believe it? Because my question was, I remember asking him about his daughters once, so there was a picture on his desk, and I remember saying, so if you love your children and I cut you open, am I going to get evidence that you love them? Are you going to... And it's not, but I wasn't laying down the gauntlet. What I was doing was giving you that idea of, when you tell someone that you love your children, or you really feel this emotion for something, that can't be real, because I can't find it, I can't see it.
Do you know what this reminds me of? I know that this is going out before Christmas, so it reminds me of Miracle on 34th Street. Because is it not the bit in Miracle on 34th Street at the end when they're, I don't want to spoil it if nobody's seen it. I think everybody knows about that film, don't they?
She come to the drive-in.
Well, funnily enough, there's a drive-in movies Sunday. I think that's a Sunday afternoon show down at Falkirk Stadium. Good, well done. You're thinking, I'm not, Mark.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no problem at all. And in the movie, when they're in the court at the end, you know, Kris Kringle's he's going down, and then he brings up, well, you know, the thing about, so you only, if it's for it to be real, you have to see it. Yeah. And he brings out the dollar, and then on the US dollar it says, "In God we trust."
God we trust. Yeah.
Well, and that was the kind of point. It says you trust in God, you trust in the you know the you know that you trust in that being, if you will. Don't want to get too deep into that at all. But you don't believe in Santa Claus. So it's the same thing.
That's it. And that is, but you know, you said there we don't want to. You want to go that deep into it, but it's when you get that deep into it is where the real stuff happens. It's when you really start questioning stuff. It's when you allow yourself that time to go, actually, I'm not going to dismiss that, because I kind of refused at that point to realise that actually things like probably one of the biggest things that I think that I had to really train myself to do was to change my inner dialogue with myself.
So see, one of the things I meant to ask you to say this, so apologies. When your consultant says, "Are you still doing your Reiki thing?" Mm-hmm. Or words to that effect. Now, what's the answer to that? So when you said you were going to Reiki, you know this is not a one-hit wonder. So is this a regular thing that you would do, or do you still do it?
I haven't.
Do you still go for Reiki?
Very occasionally, and a part of that, and there's an element of, I suppose there's an element of hypocrisy in this, in the sense of I tell people about putting themselves first, look after yourself,
self-care.
And I don't always get to do that, because the last few years, as you know, has been a bit tricky. Laura and I have had, we've got our two at home. We'll come to that in the next part. But we've got, both of our children, two of our young children that have got Crohn's disease. So it's quite hard to fit in anything around. It's not that I don't. It's that if I can fit that stuff in, then I absolutely do, because I know I benefit from it. But at the time, at that really pivotal bit between 16 and 20. My meditation practice was fairly. I was going to say fairly strict. It was just a practice. I enjoyed doing it. I went to Reiki maybe once every 6 to 8 weeks. And it's not that it kind of tailed off. It's that I learned to do Reiki myself. So I could do Reiki myself.
You're right. I never actually realised that. Excuse me. You can actually do Reiki on yourself. So are you a Reiki practitioner?
Yeah.
You just get loads of skills, didn't you, Mark?
Well, it's having the right. I suppose it's having the right tools for your thing, because there's lots of things over the years that I've trained in that I've maybe dismissed later because I'm thinking, well, that's maybe not me. But you try everything. It's that bit about hope, and especially when you're trying to help other, do stuff with other people, because IBD, and you will know this, better than anyone, is that it is not a one size fits all.
No, absolutely
not. When someone's got, I'm not being dismissive of any of these other conditions or autoimmune diseases, but when people have got something like asthma or diabetes, people know, well, this is how you do that, and they're still unpredictable and they're still debilitating to work with. But IBD has got so many unknowns, so many different things. There's 3 of us and there's 4 of us live in the house, and 75% of IBD, but it's completely different for all of us. You've got
there's three totally different experiences there, aren't there? So
the bit for the pivotal bit for me in those probably 4 years up until I was about 20 is that it became, I suppose I was trying to shift from being a catastrophizer, a worrier, all these things. I still am those things to a degree. I'm not going to lie. That's the bit about all this stuff I have to practice. I've maybe just got a bit better at it and developed a few strategies. But by the time I had got to that kind of 19, 20, there was a bit of me going, it's not that IBD was in the back of my mind, but there was a bit of me going, I don't think I believe that my future is going to be, that's going to be my story, and I don't think I want to believe that I'm going to go down the line of, well, he had this cut out and that cut out, and the thing is,
but to go back a little bit, like for anybody watching this who's maybe thought about Reiki or you know it's maybe worked for them or not worked for them or whatever, you know what I'm trying to get clear in my head, because admittedly I don't quite understand it, but I would love to know more about it.
Yeah.
When you've been to the event with your gran, and you know that you get taken and you got a little sample of Reiki. After that, how often did you go, and how did that benefit you, in your opinion? Because obviously it did benefit you.
Yeah, I mean, I probably went. I mean, there was a place in Falkirk and a place in Bo'ness that I went to, probably on like a monthly basis for quite a, you know, for a good couple of years.
Yeah.
But it was the bits in between that were important, because most of the stuff I was reading, what I got really interested in was this. I got really interested in self-healing, but I actually got more interested in this idea of, at a really young age, what personal development and self-help was about. I don't particularly like the names personal development and self-help, and I've always had a bit of a kind of, and although I've, you know, written a book about it and it's the kind of work that I do, it's almost that what I'm interested in is human potential. That bit about what we're capable of is why I love working with kids, because kids often haven't made up their mind yet of what they're capable of, and if you create conditions to allow them to experience
I think most adults have not made their mind up as well.
Well, it's true, but quite often it's because they don't permit themselves time to.
Yeah.
We get caught up in, well, I'm a dad, I'm a business owner, I'm a mum, I'm a whatever I am.
Yeah, people get caught up in the rat race, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
totally.
and I suppose that's the thing of what I was getting interested in is, I suppose for me it was just like, I've always been a what if person, and I used to get ridiculed a little bit from people from being what was called either an eternal optimist or a blind optimist, because I'm very good at finding a silver lining, but not for the sake of it, not for blind hope. So the older I've got and the more experience I've got in the work that I do, I'm still an optimist, but it comes from a place of being informed. So I am by nature an informed optimist, and that's why at a young age there was a bit of me going, I would like to. I didn't know if it was possible, but I remember thinking I'd like to try and take a bit of control over this, because I was still a worrier, I was still a hypochondriac, I still didn't want to go into hospital and get surgeries and stuff, and I do have to sit here as an adult and be okay with going, that is still a possibility. There is still a possibility that I could have. I still have flare-ups from time to time. I just manage them in a particular way. Yeah,
I think something that we've spoke loads on the Gutsy podcast and just in day to day is the self-management, because with the greatest will in the world, when you go for your appointments at a hospital, your clinicians, your IBD, there actually is no magic wand. And it has to be a two-way street. It has to be teamwork, and they can advise on your meds and give you a program like that. But you have to have a self-care, and you have to do your bit as well, and manage that. And I think the best outcome for the individual is when it's done as a team. It's not like getting in there and going, right, fix me.
That is 100% true.
Fix me.
It's 100% true. The most important person is always going to be the person that's living with it.
Of course.
When you've got the right people around you, and it is the little bit, you will get lots of advice, you'll get lots of offerings and stuff, but I mean, human beings are dead interesting. No matter, you can have these gurus tell you what to do, you can have a parent tell you, a partner, lots of people will tell you what you're going to do. More often than not, you're going to do what you're going to do anyway. More often than not, we will kind of go, I hear you, however, and they go off and do that. Somebody
phones you, listen, I really, really need your advice, and you're going, right, okay, so you spend, I'm actually thinking a couple of instances here, no names, absolutely no names, and you're going, you're getting a half hour, an hour of your time or whatever that is, and you know that the person on the phone or over a lunch or whatever, they're just going to do what they're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's like, what's the point?
I think I've done it my whole life, and it's the bit of, I just finished yesterday, I was working with this amazing group of mums in Grangemouth. We went through the parents programme, and one of the things that we kind of finished on is they had said, we'll talk about the ladder in a moment. It says, I really like the ladder and this idea of becoming an observer of your own thoughts.
Just easy on the ladder. We don't want you to get into that too quick.
I won't peak too soon.
Don't peak too soon.
It's funny. I have to be careful not to build it up too much because some people might go,
"Is that it?
That's it. Live life by facts." It's not that easy.
You bother me.
But one of the things I'd said is, look, don't take this program as don't take it as a roadmap of how to manage these things. This is take what you want from it and use it. And if there's bits of it that's not been useful, do your own thing anyway.
Yeah.
You said something a moment ago that just kind of struck something with me. You said there's no magic wand. I had a guy. I was in my early to mid 20s. I was my job title was I was a through care and aftercare worker. So I worked with children in the care system, and I was working with a lad down in a homeless hostel in Falkirk, and I absolutely loved that job. It was a privilege to do it. But I met this. There was a staff member that worked in this homeless hostel. He was an old guy, and kind of late 60s, who'd worked past retirement because he really liked his job. And I used to go and have a coffee with him. He was a banjo player. That's one of the we kind of bonded over music. I'm a huge music fan.
Yeah, I
love blues music. I played in a band for years, and we'd blether away. And on this particular day, I'd looked at my watch, finished my coffee, says, I need to go. I said, I've got a hospital appointment. And he says, is everything all right? And I went, I said, I've got inflammatory bowel disease. I said, I need to go and see my consultant. And he went, Crohn's or colitis? And I went, a bit of both apparently. I said, but at the moment I'm getting treated for colitis. And he went, he says, I've had Crohn's since 1960, whatever it was. And he says, I've had Crohn's since, I think he'd been diagnosed maybe in like his 20s or something, and he was now in his late 60s. Yeah. And I was like that, and I was like, I've got 10 minutes. Because you get interested when you get, I bet you never came across a lot of people. Not then. Then I could ask in my teens and 20s, people, you would mention Crohn's or colitis, and it was very much, it was like, so what is it? People didn't know. I say it now. If I talk about it now, everyone knows someone. Yeah, I mean, it sadly really has. It's unfortunate, but this, I know it's become very, very popular. Very popular. Very popular. It's unfortunately our diagnosis is through the roof. Not great. But this old guy. This old guy had said, I was diagnosed with that, and I'd said and my first question, because I was still at that age, I was still like a bit of a catastrophizer, and to a degree I would say I still am. But this is what was interesting. And my question to him was, how many surgeries have you had? And he went, none. He says, I see it, and he says, I see I've got it. He says, but I've managed it really well. He says, he described himself as he says, I'm a bit of an old hippie that way. He says, right. He says, I take my medications. What I loved about him, and it's probably what I needed to hear, he says, I still go for my appointments every 6 months. He says, because of my age, I get a colonoscopy every, I think it was 3 years at the time. He says, because you don't want to play with this stuff. He says, but I kind of get into this, this kind of self-help thing everyone talks about, and I'm like, fuck, I'm going to be late for my appointment, but I want to listen to this. Yeah. But what he said was, he says, I remember being told, similar story to a lot of people. I mean, I'll say this, and it's really important for people to hear this. What I was going to say is I'm one of the lucky ones. And I don't mean I'm the lucky one in that I haven't had surgery and I haven't ended up with certain things. I've done a significant amount of work to avoid that and continue to. Yeah. But not for a second can I take my foot off the gas and become complacent. Yeah. Because it's a reality that somewhere down the line this could get worse. I could let things get out of control. Yeah. So you have to, as much as I don't give it too much attention, because my attention at this moment is obviously on my family. There is that part of you just have to be aware that this isn't looking at, having a chronic condition which is lifelong. It also means that you have to give yourself permission to lifelong look after yourself. Yeah. So that's how I can frame it. Yeah, but it's an easy done thing, isn't it? I mean, if you're in a good place, you kind of revert back to what that your normal would be, and that might be it. And you're maybe going to the pub a few more times, or maybe
eating the stuff that you shouldn't, and then you kind of.
I'll finish that bottle of red wine because there's only a glass left in it, or so there's all these things.
We'll not hold that against you.
But what got me when you said there is no magic wand. When I spoke to this guy in the hostel and we were just exchanging stories and stuff, what he said was, he says, I get told. I liked the way he spoke, by the way, because he was a bit like he looked a bit like Dumbledore. This big long beard and the big kind of big ponytail. And one of the things he'd said was, I was told years ago, unfortunately there is no magic wand to this. And he says, I'm a writer. He says, I've written some books and stuff like that, and this is the kind of stuff that I write about. And he says, I actually wrote a piece 10 years ago, and the piece is called You Are the Magic Wand. He says, and it's because I was realising that he'd went off to do a retreat with monks, years before this, and he says monks talk about them being the magic wand, is that we have everything in us that we need.
Yeah.
But when you are dealt a really shit card, like an autoimmune disease or cancer, or or even a birth defect, all these things, he says how you play the hand is really important. He said nobody will play it for you. He said, so you are actually the magic wand. And it kind of struck this bit with me, because I'm kind of going, we do need to sometimes claw back a wee bit of power. We do need to take a little bit of power over this and kind of say, right, and that's what I mean about.
But that's not natural for a lot of people to do that and take that back, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like some people feel so helpless in a situation that they want guidance. They want people to make those decisions. Now, obviously,
and so they should.
If you're dealing with a kid, the parents make those decisions. But sometimes even they want that because they're helpless. So as human beings, we don't always have that, and sometimes people do naturally. A majority of people don't, I would suggest.
Yeah.
And some people learn it.
Absolutely. And it's a conversation that my wife and I have had several times about how we are with the kids in this, because whenever we sit in a consultation, one of the things is sometimes the consultants or the doctors will look to us. Yeah. And we often will divert them to the kids.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And there's a balance of that, because we want the kids to be heard. We also know that eventually there's going to come a time when both our kids are going to fly the nest and they're going to be off doing this on their own, and
do you know what? It's actually not that far away. But we're going to get your kids in a minute, because we're kind of jumping the gun a wee bit. God's sake, stick to the programme.
Apologies.
No, you're right, I'm only kidding. I like how we meander. Would be fair to say, and I hope I'm not jumping the story a wee bit here. So you've started, you're well on your way with your self-management, and it's working for you.
Yeah.
Early 20s?
You're
a dad by now.
By the time I was 20, when I was 20, I had a 3-year-old, so that was, it was significant. It was a lot of things. It was amazing, first of all. There's a whole story about it, and I have to be careful how I tell that story. What I mean by that is how people view things can be very different. Whilst being a teenage parent is very, very difficult. I was having this conversation I went to see, so it's my oldest son, Chris, is 27 years old, unbelievable musician. And I don't say that as a kind of gushing parent.
Yeah, you do.
This lad, I do a little bit.
Of course, you should.
But he packed out the local this local venue a couple of weeks ago.
Brilliant.
His band, The Fallen Hearts. And
nice plug.
Absolutely. There may be a few in this podcast, but one of the things is, like, we were having this. We've had conversations before, and he is, as much as I'm his dad, he's a pal. We share same interests. I'm unbelievably proud of him and what he's achieved. But being a young dad is really difficult. And being a young dad, and the agreement that I had with his mother was that I would see him a couple of times a week, because we'd separated. So there was lots of. As much as there's all the love and the care and being a dad and all the good side of it, there is another part of it, which is there's the responsibility of it, there's the worry of it, there's a whole.
Did this process in any way affect your inflammatory bowel disease?
It probably played a factor in it, because I did used to get nervous and anxious, Not when I was with him, but because I wasn't his main carer, it took quite a long time to build rapport and relationship with him, because there was times when I would go and see him and he would just cry. It was like, you know, who the fuck's this big guy coming to see me, you know? But the sticking with it was so important, that actually making that conscious decision, going like, well, this you don't get to choose this. You need to be here and you want to be here. But there was still an air of anxiety and kind of stress that went with being a young dad, and
of course
there was a whole bunch of other stuff. But I think this is I need to be careful, because this isn't a statistic, and it's not and I don't think it's a fact. It's merely my life's experience when it comes to IBD, when it comes to most illnesses, that stress plays one of the biggest factors, particularly with autoimmune diseases, but stress is one of the biggest factors in so many modern diseases, and we live in such a stressful culture now.
Very.
I get the privilege of working with a lot of parents throughout the year, and a lot of teachers and prison officers and social workers, and burnout is rife. Burnout and people saying things like, you know, I'm only 42, I'd rather leave my job and go and stack shelves in Tesco. I know folks that are stacking shelves in Tesco that have got the same worries. You know, it is everywhere, and but one of the things that changes significantly is when you start to manage your stress, when you start to be okay and give yourself permission to put yourself at the top of your own task list and look after yourself. Now, that just rolls off the tongue. It's fucking hard to do when you're a mum, a dad, a business owner, homeless. At every level just now, the stress that is sweeping the world is unbelievable. And that is why I would like to think that if people come into our house, they would see a house that wasn't a stressful house. We've got like everyone, we have our
no, I've seen a picture of your kitchen fell apart, so I bet that's stressful.
Man, do you know, as someone that believes there's a sign for everything, because it is true, there's a reason things happen. I've not quite figured this one out yet. Well, Laura and I were talking about this the other night, but that was just for the viewers and for those listening. I came in a couple of nights ago and was talking to Laura, and I literally opened this massive, we have this cupboard that we most of us have with plates and dishes and everything in it, and mid conversation I just went to literally just kind of flick the door shut, and it went and I was like, you know, you have fight or flight. My immediate thing was actually I will hold this up, and I thought, you're not that fucking strong, Marco. So it was then flight, poof, and I got out the road, and it was like everything came crashing down. Oh
dear, that sounds lovely.
But here's the thing, is that how often does that happen in life, where things do come crashing down? Things come crashing down, they make a huge mess, we lose stuff, it's painful and all the rest of it. But how you respond thereafter is the most important bit. And this is one of the things that I talk about in programmes. Yeah,
I think you've touched on something that's massively important. I think I was actually speaking about something similar the other day, where somebody had made a mistake, shall we say, an arse it. And what I always look for is people make mistakes. It's natural. Things don't go according to plan. But sometimes I think it's how they actually deal with that mistake, how they come out the other side, and how you actually maybe change the narrative on what's happened and influence that. That's the bit that counts. That's the bit that's that really is important for me.
I used the example of the mistakes or tragedy or trauma. When things happen, it's what happens thereafter is the important bit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what age group I'm working with, but everyone will have an example of this. Again, I heard this years and years ago. I can't remember who first said it. It's one of these things that has turned into one of these annoying Facebook quotes. I don't say that.
You know the one. I love the Facebook quotes, and they've got this. They've got these. I mean, most of them are quite good quotes, and you can relate to them. And they've got like Thomas Shelby on them, or they've got like some gangster dude that there's a quote for Gandhi, and they've got Al Capone.
It's a quote for Tupac, Actually, his quotes were quite good. I do love a quote if it is relevant and if it's real. But one of the things, and it's used a lot now, and I definitely use it. But I did hear it years ago, and it's that bit about life is 10% what happens to you, and 90% how you respond. Now, if you learn that at a young age, and that is what I talked earlier on, and I do this, I do a lot of this work when we've done prison work previously. Interestingly, I did a programme and it was either Berlin or Socht, and it was years and years ago. And when I was talking to this group of inmates about their offences, they're fascinating. You can learn so much with working with people who that have been involved in crime and who live in prison, because almost everything has been taken away from them except their responses. You can't really control how someone responds, although other people think you can. And as we went through this conversation, people were saying, well, I'm in here for burglary, I'm in here for fraud, I'm in here for murder, I'm in here for this. And because of the content, the way that the direction that my programme goes in, one of the things that they spoke about was, so there was what I did, there was the stimulus, the what happened, and then there was the aftermath. And actually what often got them arrested and what got them incarcerated was the decision in the middle. And then when we broke it down, they would say, the blame thing kicked in. But I did it because of that. I grew up in care, or my dad was a dick, or I flew with the wrong crowd, and I'm kind of going, but what about the choice part of it? And once they start to get that idea of, you do, for the most part, we do get to pick our responses. The older we get, we have more control over our responses. And I teach that in schools. I teach it through I teach it through challenges, I teach it through activities, I teach it through meditation in a lot of ways. But when people start to actually practice it, and as a very, very simple but relevant example was a lad I worked with 6 months ago who said, I've broke 10 Xbox controllers because I just fucking react when I lose at Fortnite. Now, I met this lad a couple of days ago, and something I'd taught him in the programme is I'd said to him, what number of controllers are you on now? And he went, I've broke one in 10 months, Marco. And it is that bit about the whole... And I'm not making it as easy as that, but because there is a kind of process that you need to go through. But the thing about the thing falling off the wall the other day is that Laura and I looked at it, and we saw like all these dishes and everything, and after we'd kind of like come around, we kind of like, it was like, right, so if we just pick this up and put this in there, and there's no real drama to it. Nobody was hurt, nobody was injured,
exactly.
And Laura has her reaction to things is often quite different to mine, because I came in, literally was in 24 hours later in the kitchen, I'm going, this place looks amazing, apart from that this was there, but everything, she'd rearranged things, she'd done stuff, and I'm kind of going, very, very quickly, your response is, you can control the controllables.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, but I think that's a lesson that everybody can learn, and it probably touches on your ladder as well. There's you can't stress about the things you can't control. You can't influence it. You do the best with what you've got and what you can actually have an impact on. Yeah. Because otherwise, you're just kind of making up your head a wee bit.
This is
which causes you a challenge.
If you grew up in an environment, we touched on this a while ago, is that we are products of our environment, we're products of our upbringing. We then come to a point where we start to choose our environment, and we choose who we spend time with because we have that choice. But if you grew up in a household with overreactors and worriers and all these things, you will be. You chances are it's a big part of who you are. But nothing is that hardwired that you can't put the work in. And I have done a lot of work over that stuff and continue to. So the bit about, it's why this bit about the ladder is quite important, because when it was, and again, we will come to it, but it is that bit of, we're
not even at the range yet.
Yeah. We'll move on.
But no, I think you're right. And interesting how you turned your cupboard into a fine analogy.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. Right, so would it be fair to say that self-management has worked for you? Is it a mix of self-management and medication from the medical team at this point?
Absolutely, yeah.
And and I'm not mean to be to trivialise this in any way, and if you're your early 20s, you've got a 3-year-old. Now you're well into your 40s. Yeah. Likewise. Champing the door of the other one. Has that been the journey for you personally? nothing else, you personally, over that period, you know, just that self-management through your meditation, through Reiki, through everything else that you know you've spoken about, but also in partnership with your medical team. Has that been that story?
Absolutely. If I didn't have the medical side of it, I think this conversation would be very, very different.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm sure it would be, because there's times where I've had to change medication, or I've needed more of something, and because the thing is that, see, I mean, Reiki and meditation, which is still a part of my life, and it needs to be more of a part of my life, you know, given where I'm at. But the Reiki meditation, it's a bit like, you know, if you get hit by a bus, you're not going to sit and go and meditate and you'll feel better. We'll do some Reiki, you know, we'll fix your leg. You want a medical team to come and sort that stuff out. You want when you merge east with west,
providing you're still alive, of course, because a bus.
But you know, and that's a severe example. But the thing is that whilst the body is designed to heal itself and to recover, your job is to create the conditions to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
So I've had difficult and uncomfortable conversations over the years with, like, one of them in particular. I feel like I need to be careful how I say this. My current IBD consultant, one of the things I actually had to tell him, I think it must be about 5 years ago now, he was making me anxious when I was going to see him, because one of the things that he spoke about often was, and he just had this like need to say it, says, you know, the older you get, Mark, the higher risk you become for bowel cancer. You've had this since you were a teenager. We need to keep a closer eye on you. And he mentioned the C word quite a lot, and which goes right back, which takes me back to my triggers. Yeah. So I went through quite a significant period of anxiety 12 years ago, and it was the one and only appointment I've missed in 32 years, I think, is that I had an appointment to go, and part of me was kind of going, I don't think I can go there and face this today, because I know what the chat's going to be. I was like, physically, medically, symptom wise, I was okay at that point, but my head was all over the shop for personal reasons, and I thought, I can't go and see him today. So I missed the appointment and got my letter through. You know, shouldn't have missed it. Never ever miss never ever miss an appointment. You know, it's really important. But I went there maybe like 2 months later, and he properly gave me a dressing down. He says, you shouldn't be missing this, you shouldn't be missing that. And I said, see, just before we go, doctor, I says, like, and it's a new git, so Dr. Holden retired when I was in my 20s, and I've had another doctor since then who I like. But I'd said to him,
sure, we're delighted to hear that.
But he knows this of them, because we have, you know, sometimes you have to have frank conversations when the stakes, when the stakes are. I like him and I respect him. But what I said to him was, I'm going to be honest, I didn't come because I couldn't sit there in the way I was and hear you banging on about cancer. I says, I have to respectfully ask you to, I'm not, I think what I said was, I'm not trying to ignore this and know that it's not a possibility. I said, it's just that it's not how I choose to live my life. I choose my life that's, and you know this as well as I do, Derek, no matter what you're looking for in life, you will find it, good or bad. So at this moment in time, you know, when parents or anyone that's got this diagnosis, if you look for the horror stories, because they're real, people live them every day. If you look for them, you will find them in abundance. You will find lots of trauma, lots of tragedy, lots of painful and scary stuff to read. But the opposite of it is exactly true. That there is categorically as many success stories out there. And what I will say is, that is just my opinion. If I was to look just now, if I was to say, who's managing this really well? Who is, you know, what's the cutting edge stuff? What's the stuff that's really working? What's the hope stuff? What's the optimism? What's the this? What's the that? I will find an abundance of that as well. Now, if I focus on that, I'm aware that this is here. I'm aware that there is all this, because I've been through part of it. I've lived part of it. I'm living part of it with my children just now. But I also know that I would much rather focus on the positive. I'd much rather focus on the hope. I'd much rather focus on this is where we want to go.
Yeah.
Knowing, but still keeping a really balanced view of what is possible. I know that that's there. It's just that it doesn't mean I need to pick the scab, you know.
And I think that's a really, for me, the way to do it. You know, it's like, be realistic and know there's the negatives aspect here, but be searching for the positive, be searching for the stuff that's going to work for you. You know, be inspired by the people who it's working well for, and you know, and different strains in life. But it's also that thing, if you quite rightly put, if you want to find something, you'll find it, because you'll get, it's confirmation bias, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I want to find something that's absolutely glorious. You're going to find all these good things and some things that are maybe pie in the sky and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to find something that's negative, or something that backs up a theory you've got, or a position that you've took on, whether that's inflammatory bowel disease or politics or did they land on the moon? You know, you're going to find something to back it up,
and it backs up your beliefs. So you have to be careful what you believe. That's for me, is that you can. And the other thing is that is be amenable to having your beliefs changed.
Yeah, because the thing to take into consideration is, and I think we all can. I think we can forget. I certainly can, but. The person that you were last year is not the person that you are just now.
Yeah.
And the decisions that you made last year, you know, you might not make them now, and it's okay to be different, and it's okay to, you know, it's okay to be that. And look, some people hold people to the decisions of the past, and you shouldn't be shaped by that in any way, shape or form as well. You know
Absolutely.
where you are, and your beliefs can change.
Yeah,
your stance on stuff can change.
Yeah,
I mean, God's sake, man, that lockdown's a prime example, isn't it?
That's it.
Where you know you had people who covered the whole spectrum, who were, you know, for want of a better phrase, they were kind of almost like lockdown Nazis. You know, that you can't do this, you can't do that, and then by the end of it, they're like, you know, don't get vaccinated, don't, you know, go and do what you want.
That's
and
it.
They went give me out. They went from one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
Right. So I really love that kind of. That your self management, but also it's teamwork with the medical team and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people can learn from that. I'm going to jump on a little bit, because you're all right now.
That'll be fine.
You're not too bad. And talk about your younger kids.
Yeah.
Talk about Josh and Livy, who are great kids who I've had the pleasure of meeting on many occasions. Yeah. And obviously your lovely wife Laura, who I spent a week with this week doing the West Highland Way.
She's hardcore, absolutely, Laura.
Listen, do you know what? She was absolutely brilliant on it. Yeah. She was absolutely brilliant, and she fought through the pain barrier quite a few times with her leg from early on. She does wee kick out leg.
Yeah. and continues to, you know, she's still having to work on that, working that
really
for that just now. Yeah.
So spend a week with me and be, you know, have a disability we like. Doesn't sound quite right. So, no, I think you mentioned earlier on. We know that Josh and Livy have both been diagnosed in the not too distant past with Crohn's.
Yeah.
So Josh was first.
Right? Josh was just about 3 years ago.
Right. Now, how old is Josh for the people that watch?
So Josh has just turned 16. Turned 16 in the.
So around about the same time you were diagnosed then.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, there wasn't much
a bit parallel there.
Not much in it. And of course, there's that story you tell yourself as a parent, because very similar to my kind of lead into the story. For a long time, and I'm talking years, Josh would have these sore stomachs, which was as a parent, if you were a parent that didn't know about IBD, or if one of the parents didn't have IBD, it would just, I think it is just that they seem to get lots of sore tummies when they do this. And Josh also has an allergy. He's got a significant allergy to sesame, so he has to have EpiPens. You know that?
I knew that.
Because you have to cater for him at these
events.
I knew
that we have to cater for him. Pain in the arse.
But he is, and again, it's something that he manages that really, really well on his own. But these sore stomachs became more severe, more prolonged. Nights where,
and is that something that you recognise for your experience at this point?
Didn't want to, but
were you in denial?
Did. I don't think I was in denial. Because, well, no, actually.
Tell the truth now.
Well, no, I think no. It's important. No, but it's important to ask that a second time, because sometimes you do go a bit further. And I think I wanted to be in denial, and I could have been in denial, but Laura and I, I suppose we've had to kind of team tag this, and Laura has lived with me for a long time, so she's known my journey with it, and I think we both. It was maybe unsaid for a wee while, and then I think one night, we both made. I can't really remember how it happened.
Was it kind of the elephant in the room?
Maybe through fear. Yeah,
I think, but I don't think it matters where it came from.
Yeah,
but it's there.
I think probably I think at some point we said Laura would actually tell you this story better than I would, just because of her account of it. Laura she remembers things as they happened, and I think maybe I have not a filter over it, but I remember it in a different way. But we did say one night, we do need to consider the fact that you have this, and there is the genetic element, whatnot. But Laura, we'd had him at a few appointments. He'd been at the doctors, and it was like, could be lactose intolerant, could be this, could be that. So you try a few things, and in my head I'm kind of going. There's a wee bit of me going. I feel like I'm reading a book that I've read before here, kind of thing.
I've been in this movie,
and then thinking about how this plays out, and there was lots of things. But again, it wasn't the what is deemed to be the atypical symptoms of Crohn's. Lots of toilet visits, blood, poo, all that kind of thing.
But you know what? And I think it's really, really important for anybody who maybe is not. Doesn't have an understanding of IBD, or even does have an understanding of IBD. The inflammation of inflammatory bowel disease can appear anywhere.
That's it.
It's like we always speak about the bowel condition and all that, but there's so many different ways this can manifest.
Absolutely,
so many.
And his was pain. Always has been pain, and latterly and most recently fatigue. So the whole piece about it was, back and forth to the doctors. Then it was escalated to, paediatricians, and then eventually, he was in Glasgow, and I think the biggest indicator at one point was he had a calprotectin of over 1,000, over 1,200 maybe, and it was then that the consultant says, we're going to need to scope him, and part of me was like, again, bittersweet, because you're going to get a definitive diagnosis, hopefully. But the other part is, both of these sayings are true. Ignorance is bliss and knowledge is power. Both of them in equal measure, depending on what you're dealing with. Both of them can be true, depending on the situation and depending on the person. But as a parent, you don't want to see your child continuing to be off school, have these sore stomachs, not be able to eat, miss family dues, miss gigs, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all this music.
So we got, a short while after that, Josh had an endoscopy and a colonoscopy, and then the news was delivered: your son has Crohn's disease. And I did, and I do remember, I think Laura was. So I was there when Olivia came round. I wasn't there when Josh came round because I think it was maybe just after COVID, so there was only one person allowed in, or I was working. There was something, but Laura had told me over the phone or kind of via text. But I remember thinking to myself, he's got Crohn's. And in my head, it was really interesting because I actually it was like in a wee movie, I kind of went right back to being 13-year-old, worrying, catastrophising, overthinking, hypochondriac. It didn't last long though, because there was a bit of me going, because I am quite good at bringing myself back now, not all the time, but I kind of went, right, deal with the facts. He's got Crohn's. He's now going to have a treatment. Let's get a treatment plan. Actually, you have this. Look where you're at now. That kicked in quite quickly. It was traumatic though. I mean, there's a bit of me going, my boy, it's like, my boy, jeez, I find it.
Of course. So did you feel guilty? Was that a feeling?
I find this bit a bit hard, actually.
It's great box office, but keep going.
No, it's like a...
I'm not kidding.
No, it's...
no, but I feel like it's a very natural reaction.
Yeah. I still... You know, it's... Again, I feel like a bit of a hypocrite saying this because of the work I do and the conversations I have, but there is still this... It kicks in sometimes when I go, I made a conscious decision to have children. I made a conscious decision, knowing what I have and knowing, what part of my life was like with it and knowing what could happen. I made a conscious decision. So there is a bit of guilt kicks in.
Really?
But what I know from a relative, from an intellectual point of view, but not intellectual and from an intelligence point of view of, there is no reward for guilt. We get nothing out of it. So it is pointless. Now, sometimes we do stuff we should feel guilty about. Absolutely, we know that, and God, absolutely, I know that, and I feel it. But like what you said, it's what you do after it that counts. It can't undo the thing, but it's what you decide to do after that really becomes the kind of the definition of it. I believe. So the guilt thing for me pops in from time to time when I think to myself. When I've seen both my kids really, and Josh is at the moment struggling with it, so there is a guilt thing which I'm not entirely sure how to manage it yet. I can come back from it and go, you're getting fuck all out of this guilt. What you need to do, Mark, is
I know, but I would imagine. Show me somebody who's not felt guilt at some point in their life.
Yeah,
it'll be pretty much nobody. But. So as a difficult thing to work around. Now the guilt that you feel as a parent is because I would assume that you feel as if there's a certain amount of responsibility lies with you because your son at this point has been diagnosed. To me, that's super natural.
Yeah.
But your professional mindset and how you deal with things kind of triggers into, right, okay, well, these are my natural feelings that I'm feeling, but this is my my mind working in a a process that should work, and these are the things, but you can't get away from that natural feeling.
No,
it'll rear its head.
Yeah,
and especially if you see him struggling.
But I think the balance of it, Derek, with the guilt bit, then. Which kind of fades, once things can get back to health and normality, or whatever that looks like. I think the other
what is normality?
I think what kind of resumes after that is that I then kind of look at the informed optimist part. Like, so what can we do? I am a firm believer, because I've seen it my whole life. I have irrefutable evidence of this stuff. Is that every single situation, every problem has a solution of sorts.
I agree.
Sometimes it's not the solution we wanted, and sometimes it's not going to be the cure, the end all, but there's always something you can do.
You might be looking at a situation, and your situation says, well, here's your 3 choices, for example, and they're all shit.
Yeah.
But they are a choice. There's maybe you pick the lesser of the evils, if you will. But there's definitely. I firmly believe that there's always a solution. It might you might be down a road that you're not really doing somersaults about, but there's a way of navigating it. There's a path to make it better.
And I also don't believe, like, there was one of the not a quote but a saying from my childhood. That I kind of grew up with. See that saying, "What's for you'll no go by you." I hate it, and I say that with kind of it's like, because that kind of thing of, there's a little bit of a, whilst I get it, and some people might agree with it, I'm kind of like, it's not how that saying's intended. It's, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. Now, I absolutely believe in karma. In every way of it, both good and bad, the stuff that you put out there and the stuff that you manifest and all that kind of stuff. But the what's for you'll no go by you, I'm kind of going, maybe that's true, and maybe certain things are written and maybe some things are meant to be. But when you get in the driving seat of your own life and you kind of go, actually, it's been a bit of a shitty hand I've been dealt, but I'm going to play it the best I can, and actually I'm going to reshuffle it a little bit. and there'll be times when I pick another card because fuck you. And that is fundamental about when you start to take control over what is possible. So I do believe that you can not only influence, but sometimes, you know, bash things onto another track for a different result. And I've seen it. Now, I'm not saying that stuff wasn't written and that's not the what's for you'll no go by you. I just think it's sometimes it's quite a kind of flippant, well, what'll be will be, que sera.
I would agree with you, because I think that's a phrase your granny would say for a start. No, my granny's part was quite good, to be fair, but that is definitely a phrase that would come out from that culture that our grandparents came from. You know, what's for you'll no go by you. Yeah. So I believe you can change that. I think, you know, we've got different thinking, and you can take yourself on a track. Of course you can. You know, why shouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't you? But come back to Josh. He's been diagnosed.
Yeah.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
What's the journey then for you guys? You know, as a family, that's tough, because, you know, you and Laura are looking at each other and going, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a real challenge, and, you know, I would definitely say life changing, you know, because it becomes in your head. You're kind of going, everyone always says, you know, I just want my kids to be happy and healthy, you know. The thing is, when they're happy and healthy, it's then like, well, I want them to have a good education, and I want them to get a good, you know, and we can kind of put layers on that. But in my head, I'm going to go, right now, if Josh could just be healthy and we can get that bit, you know.
I mean, it's an old cliche, but health is your wealth, and people don't actually realise that till they've got a challenge, whether it's for themselves or a loved one.
Well, this is it.
Then you get the value, because apart from that, you're taking it for granted. I am very blessed in life, and, you know, that I'm pretty healthy.
Yeah.
You know, and I've never really had a serious health challenge in any way, shape or form, and long may that continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think because I have unfortunately been touched with ill health in the family and loss in the family, that I tend to, I think, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it a bit more, but I think we naturally take it for granted if we're healthy, as a healthy person.
Well, it's like you can have 1,000,001 problems in life until you're ill, and then you've only got one problem.
Yeah,
it's your health. That's that.
Yeah, but you're right. But you're right in what you're saying as well. I think that's a thing that is culturally, and as human beings that we do. I think, particularly in our society, is that it's almost as if you've never quite got enough. It's like, so you said, right, well, health and happiness, or health and happiness and education, health, happiness, education, we'll fire a bit of wealth in there.
Yeah.
And when we fire a bit of wealth in there, we'll add something else on.
Let's get some success.
Yeah, absolutely. Fame, whatever that is. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said he just came back, he just spent a bit of time in Thailand recently, over the summer. And he went to places that weren't touristy, and, you know, little villages who they'd never seen somebody from the UK, you know, and he said, you know something, they've got nothing, what we would regard as nothing, and, you know, there's no wealth, or, you know, they're going out and they're fishing in the sea, get their dinner and blah blah blah, and he says they have nothing that we would suggest, you know, the materially. He says, but they've got everything, because they're the happiest people I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. And
that really hit me. I totally got it, because they've got that, you know, they've got that connection with each other, and, you know, the health in many respects with them as well. They're kind of living off the land in many respects for a lot of that. They're getting that goodness into them as well. And I totally got it. He went, they've got materially, they've got nothing. He says, but they've got everything.
Absolutely.
And it just was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, we just get so caught up in stuff, you know, and more of, and yeah. It's the way of the Western world for a lot of people. You know,
and you know, it's not getting much better, is it?
Yeah.
It's not getting much better. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
We digress. So life's changed a little bit, to say the least, but it's going to change more.
Yeah.
Because I think less. Am I right in saying less than a year later?
10 months.
10 months later.
Laura and I were on holiday. Josh was medicated. He wasn't entirely under control, but he was doing okay. Within that 10 months, we'd seen a bit of improvement because he was at that time. He'd been getting some treatment, but we knew there was still a way to go. And we were sitting. Laura and I were actually sitting. We were on the pool beds, and Olivia was in the pool because that's what Olivia and I do on holiday. We spend most of our life in the pool. But I remember watching her. You know these inflatable pillows you get in the pool. She was bouncing up and down one of them. And there was lots of other kids around her. You'll know this is that when Scottish kids are on holiday, they're the wee milk bottles walking about, the wee peely wally ones. Even at the end of the holiday, there's a hint of red where they've been sunburnt. But she wasn't just white, like she was translucent.
Yeah.
And actually, I hadn't noticed that about her but it was actually the comparison to other children. Laura and I looked at each other going, she is like proper Lynn. I think it was her first trip abroad. I think that was her first trip abroad since COVID. But we had the holiday, and I think the last couple of days of the holiday, she wasn't feeling that good. But when she came home, she took a dive, sore stomach, really not feeling well, couldn't go back to school, which isn't Olivia. I mean, you've met Olivia several times. Olivia is...
she's a wee pocket rocket,
she
isn't
is a pocket rocket and then some.
Great.
You know, she goes to gymnastics, to dance, to cheer, to pom, and she, even at the moment she comes home...
Whoa. Right, so I got the first couple. She goes to gymnastics.
Yeah.
Dance.
Cheer.
Cheerleaders.
Cheerleading. Pom.
So pom and cheerleading is not the same thing?
I couldn't tell you exactly what the different classes are. Well, I've got videos of all of them because, you know, but all of the stuff she does is, I mean, it is about
high energy.
It's high energy and it's aerobic. So like Olivia will get in from school at 4:00 just now. She'll change and she'll go into the spare room where her air track is, and she will master a new move. She is like razor sharp focus and hard on herself if she doesn't get it. So she came home and went from a 10 out of 10 in energy and was in her bed. Sore stomach, lots of kind of stuff going on there. Little symptoms, like had passed a little bit of blood, but not significant.
Significant enough, but
significant enough. And given, you know, when Laura had taken her to the doctor, and you know, and one of the things that they'd said is, I can't remember who it was, and that's why I wish Laura was here to give her account of this, because she's been in a lot more of these meetings and a lot more of these consultations. But I think what was said, I think the line was, it would be really remiss of us not to check Olivia, given her brother's recent diagnosis and Mark's condition.
But to me, that's common sense on their part and absolutely on the money. Doesn't always work like that, so thankfully.
That's the thing, is common sense isn't often common practice, unfortunately. But so we then had Olivia's going to get endoscopy and colonoscopy as well. And what was frustrating and continues to be frustrating is when what is said by a consultant or a doctor, that then the exact opposite happens, or you're given a little bit of something and it's not that. And what I mean by that, with this very specific example, is it was, you know, one of the doctors had said, you know, I mean, it is highly unlikely that you're going to have a dad and a son, and then, you know, but it's a precautionary thing. And then that was it. You know, the doctor came in and said, so we've had a look, and Olivia's got Crohn's. But the reaction, I think the reaction was different, in that it was a shock with Josh. It was a bit of a shock, although we maybe had that kind of underlying, we know this is a possibility, and we started to think if it's not just sore tummies, then there is a possibility. And with Livy, it was kind of like, so for me, it was part of here we are again, you know. But there was another part of me which is, we kind of know what we're doing now. It's like, we know that IBD culture, we know that IBD. We know the treatment, we know the options out there. It still is very different because they both manage and deal with it, and you know, and have it quite differently. But I think there was maybe one part of me which is going, I would rather it was this than something else in some ways, because it's like, and I kind of like, I've read this book before. The book changes all the time, and, and there's a lot of blank pages ahead. But so I think there was maybe a part of me which was, I was devastated for Olivia. There was a wee bit, the guilt thing actually kicked in a wee bit more at that point. There was a bit of me kind of going, just that wee voice sometimes kind of going, you've done it to two of them now. It's not, but that is just the natural part of it. It's
so it is only natural, and I think it's like getting over that, and that hurdle, probably chip back again every now and again, just to say, I think that's only natural. Now that I know they both get, you touched on it earlier on. You three in the family with inflammatory bowel disease, and all very, very different. Yeah. So what would you say if you could, and you might not be able to do this, so what would you say were the key components of your inflammatory bowel disease, the key things in Josh's and the key things in Livy's? Because you mentioned earlier on, so Josh, the manifestation of his IBD is fatigue.
Yeah.
The manifestation is pain. When you have, even though yours is so well managed, when it rears its head, how does it manifest with you?
It manifests with me for me, it's toilet trips and blood. It's visible. And feeling as well, the pain bit of it is always, is there, and it's kind of, you learn to live with it, and then that becomes your norm. And
it becomes your normal, doesn't it? I was a good friend of mine, like Leslie. She was talking about it. She's in a good place just now, and but she wasn't for a long time. But that really how low and how painful, and the pain that she was in, and the toilet, that became normal and just life. Yeah. And then when you're on that a peak and in a good place, it's like, can't believe I was there. Yeah. That normal changes, doesn't it?
That's it.
Your normal changes.
So for me, it's visible. For me, it is passing blood, that kind of thing, and going to the toilet more and dealing with a bit of pain. What I tend to do though is, and it's definitely the bit that I've got a lot better at the older I get, is that I don't react to it in the same way. So I don't immediately go, I'm going to go and make an appointment, I'm going to go and start this, I'm going to do that. Yeah. What I actually do is that I slow everything down a little bit.
Let it breathe a bit.
So I let it breathe a bit, and I think about, is it that bad? And the thing is, if it is that bad, I will do something about it. But I'm really, really clear that that's my thing. It's not what other people should do unless they have their own kind of way of managing that. So,
I think equally, that's a great thing. But some people leave it too long. They almost don't listen to their body, and by that time they're in a bad situation.
Leaving it too long is dangerous. And I have to say that, because it's a bit like if you if you fall and break your arm, and there's a break there, and it's healing not too bad. It's actually healing quite well. I don't really want to go and get it manipulated and properly, because I don't really like. And before you know it, you're going, it's actually healed really well, but my hand's stuck in this position, and it's not got the same mobility, and it then becomes a much bigger deal. Yeah. Or it's like when if you get a bad cut and you don't clean it and you don't look after it, and you keep going, but it's just, I need to take that layer, I need to take that scab off, and it's not healing very well, and it's and we leave things too long. And this is the bit where I think Vicky Garrick, had a good analogy on last week's podcast about your stomach is like your petrol tank. Yeah. It actually controls everything else. Yeah. It has this impact on everything else. And if I couldn't have got here, my car's electric, but if I had a petrol car, but if I was driving a petrol car here and it didn't have enough fuel in it, I'm going to break down on the way. So we have to.
Yeah, but if you don't charge your fancy Tesla enough either,
if you don't charge your car, so it's the same thing. So the bit for me is there's a point that sometimes I'll go, there's a wee symptom, and it'll usually be in the back of my triggers are overindulgence in anything, so if I overindulge, whether it's food, drink, work, or just overdoing it, doing too much, not sleeping enough, not doing this, whatever, That's one of my biggest triggers. Stress factor is still the biggest trigger. Fortunately, because I know, and that's when I will go, you need to get back into your meditation. You need to get back into, don't have as much or do as much of this.
Yeah.
Look after yourself. And sometimes that little adjustment to my lifestyle will be enough for it to gently and slowly go back on track. That said, though, if I then go 2 or 3 weeks on, I'm still bleeding, I'm still going to the toilet a lot more than I would, that's the point where I have to lift the phone to the IBD team. And what's interesting is, because of my relationship with them, they will know, they will say things like, we know how you react to things, we know the type of person you are, so we're going to help you remain in that level of kind of calm, so that they know we're not going to phone him who talks about cancer, we're not going to do this, but actually what we'll do is, up your medication, or do you need some more of these, or how about that? So we know each other really well, and I've got a range of treatments on my repeat prescriptions of things that I'm going to go back to that for a while, and that's the bit about merging both. Yeah, that's the medical side and the self-care side. Yeah, put that both together, and at the very least you're stacking the odds in your favour for a better recovery. Yeah. So that's my bit. With Josh, his two worst things, and actually Olivia as well, it's both been about pain. It's both been stomach pain. They both experience joint pain. Now, for Livy, who's a born gymnast, that's very difficult because it inhibits her from Livy's life purpose is to move. Livy's life purpose is to actually push her. She pushes herself. I've got a wee video of her doing this. She did a back tuck stand. I can't remember the name at this moment, but she did this. Already
sounds massively complicated and difficult.
But that is what she's meant to do. She's meant to do this, and she helps wee ones with it as well now. She's a wee, she's a wee life coach. So
can't think where she could get it from.
So this is the bit, is that it's a really shit thing for her to have because of what it does. But again, she will also. I've seen her going, my tummy's a bit sore, but I've got a competition in 2 weeks. My tummy's a bit sore, but I need to master this, So she, when she can, she will absolutely go and do it anyway. Yeah. But again, we do have, we've got a good team around us, and we always need to make sure that she's looked after it. And Laura and I think we're very much guided by both of them. There is no point in us. We'll advise them. We will do what we need to do. Laura has, God knows how many times she's driven to Glasgow and to Wishaw in the middle of the day to take samples in, to take them for appointments, and spend so much of her life with it, doing this with them now. But it does boil down to, what do you want? What do you think? Because nobody knows Josh and Laura and I don't know Josh and Olivia as well as Josh and Olivia know Josh and Olivia. Yeah, that's
Yeah, so they're old enough. They've got their voice.
Yeah, and they're intelligent. And I don't, kids are intelligent if they're listened to, and that is why we, often in consultations and in appointments it is. And I love it when the doctors will say, they kind of let mum and dad feed into the background. It's like, so tell me how it is. And sometimes they'll look at us. Sometimes Josh and Olivia, they will look at us for validation and look for us, but we're kind of like, on you go. And it's just that. Just be honest.
Yeah, but that's a wonderful thing to do. It doesn't happen all the time, as we know. But because, as you rightly said, kind of at the outset of our chat, they're going to be in that room themselves at some point. So if they get used to having those conversations and asking for validations, they're still young. Of course, that makes perfect sense. So it's important to have that and as you quite rightly say, to be heard. Now, I think that doesn't matter. I know that it doesn't matter what age you are. The fact that you need to be heard, and when you're in life, but in general, but getting into those appointments. So you're kind of 3 years into the journey with the guy with the guys on their Crohn's journey, and I know that's been a wee bit, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. Yeah. To say the least.
And even presently, as I said, Josh was in Ward 19 yesterday with his mum for 10, 12 hours. And it was actually, as much as it, with Josh, sometimes you have to, is figuring out how to break the pain cycle so he's been off school this week for the first time in quite a while. And he is doing, Josh is doing the best he can. He's still he's trying. He went to school all last week. He has got chronic fatigue that would cripple a flipping adult. He just he doesn't have an ounce of energy. He comes home, he gets changed, he has his tea, and he goes to bed at 7 o'clock. he's missed parties, he's missed gigs, he's missing all this kind of being a 16-year-old because of the chronic fatigue, and then a few days ago, the pain, a week ago or so, the pain starts to kick in, and it becomes unmanageable. And he does manage. He in his own way. Josh is also a real warrior. He just hunkers down and gets on with it. But like human beings, there's points when it becomes too much.
Yeah, of course. So natural.
So he's in the thick of it just now.
Hopefully he comes out the other side and not too distant.
He will.
And I know that wee Livy was struggling up till quite recently, but she's got something that's working for her.
Yeah. So she's so again, both of them are on biologics. They're on different biologics, but they tweaked it. Do you know, again with the partnership and the relationship with the IBD team, we looked at the consistency of it, and made the tweaks, and she's now in a I suppose in a way that she's taken it, that it seems to be working. Brilliant. She still has the side effects. There is no plain sailing this. She still has side effects with her skin and some joint issues and stuff. Yeah. But she is, if you'd seen her, I picked her up last night. Laura was in hospital with Josh, and I picked her up from her club, and she came out and she went, "Guess what I did tonight?" And I'm like, that can't wait, because you get that, So with her, when she's fit and healthy, it fades into the background. It just becomes, I need to go to the hospital every 6 weeks. I get a cannula, I get an infusion. Still don't like it, but it allows me to go and do what I need to do.
Yeah.
So that's which is where we need to get.
Fantastic.
Get Josh
we'll hopefully by the time this goes out, Josh is in a better place in getting to his gigs, because I know he's are all massive music fans, but I know that. Yeah. I follow him online, and he's always got.
He is the ticket master.
Is he taking up an instrument? Is he not fancy it?
No. Josh has had a guitar. Well, there is a guitar in every room in my house because I'm a guitar player. But he got one years ago and held it once and played it twice, and it's just sat there as an ornament.
Yeah, and when he fancy it because you're a guitar player?
No, just not into it. But he knows music so well. He's got such an eclectic taste. He will listen to, everything from the Arctic Monkeys to Dolly Parton, and know the lyrics to everything. And a bit like, and I was listening to Simon Cowell on a podcast a couple of months ago. He was on the Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. And he says, I don't play an instrument at all. He says, I've got no inkling to do that. He says, but there is something that I know in a song that I hear that has potential, and there is something about the people, and that's what I love about Josh. He will hear a song and he will talk about, Luke Combs from the country scene, and he will find out stuff about him and who they've collaborated with.
Yeah.
And, Post Malone's journey from where he was to turn into country and stuff, and I find him fascinating. He's such a wee muso. He's great. He could be like the next Bob Harris or something.
Bob Harris.
Bob plays the sweetest tunes.
Bob Harris.
So yeah.
No, well, yeah. As I say, hopefully he's a better place by the time this goes out. Now we're going to go on to your best of you programme.
Yeah.
Because I mean, all through this, this chat has been kind of very much lots of points on your kind of your professional life and where you are, as a. I mean, when we spoke about life coach, motivational speaker, storyteller. I don't know why, but I've got an issue with the term life coach. I think it's because there's so many shysters out there.
Well, it is
and I find it quite dangerous. So I know that you're top of your game, because I've been speaking to you for such a long time and getting an understanding. I've read the book. I've read the book available on Amazon, but I know that and we'll touch on it in a little bit. We know that we're going to start doing stuff as a collaboration between MB Programs and the Catherine McEwan Foundation, which we're super excited about. So I know you're the real deal, but it scares the life out of me when I see people going to life coaches that have got something online, and there's that they've not got the skill set. They're opening up doors, and that people are looking. People are going with hope. They're maybe they're fragile.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous. The problem is that you could go on a 2-day seminar and come out and go, I'm going to be a life coach because I know good questions and I can hold the space and you can have all these buzzwords and all that bullshit. You don't actually even need to do the 2-day seminar. You can have someone tell you, you're a really good listener and I've had good advice from you, and it's like, you would be a really good life coach, bing, and that's what they go off and do.
Yeah.
And I have done the training all. I mean, I've trained as a life coach, I've trained as a neuro-linguistic practitioner, I've trained in counselling, I've done all these things over the years. And some people are happy with it. Some people like to know, I'm going to my coach, I'm going to this facility.
Oh, by the way, I'm not. It's not a bad thing, but it's got the right person.
But it's why any program that I run, it doesn't matter if it's a primary school, a high school, a prison, with parents, with teachers. The one thing that I do before they sign up for the program is I meet them the week or two before it.
Yeah.
And it is that bit about, because they are going to have to take a risk, because we're not going to play at stuff. This isn't a kind of 5-day program which is going to be all happy clappy hugs and high fives and we feel great for 5 minutes after it. If I'm going to do it, I have to do it right, and I want to know that if I'm going to bump into that person a few years down the line, that they will look back in that time, and I would prefer it if it wasn't about Mark Brown and the Best of You program, because that bit is actually secondary to the fact of actually what I chose to do was invest in myself and change a few things that I was doing, because this is the type of life that I wanted to lead. Yeah. Because it's dead easy. Don't get me wrong, it's lovely to get feedback. See, when I meet people like years down the line that will talk about, the book, or I did your program, and and it's lovely, but you can get caught up in the whole fucking ego thing of it. It's really easy to do that, and it can inflate that, but it then shifts the way you do things.
Totally.
Whereas there is a vulnerability in the program when I run it, because I am really honest about myself, and I do say to people, look, I run this program, and almost everything that I share is something that I practice or I do or I've been through, and you will make it your own and stuff like that. I says, but there is not any mastery in this. There is no guru in this. I'm very good at some of the things, and I talk about it really well, and I am good at engaging, and I am good at I suppose holding a space where someone can be on the edge of something and helping them kind of navigate that.
Yeah.
But one of the most important things is it's a bit like the stabilisers come off, and I'm like, this has to be sustainable for you to do on your own. So what I have to do to omit and kind of brush away some of the language which isn't helpful about life coach, counsellor, facilitator, motivation, leader, all that kind of stuff, it kind of paints a little bit of a picture. But when I meet them a week or two before the programme, what I usually say to them is, and I talk to them for 30 minutes, and I'll do the same with our collaboration with the parents, is to meet them beforehand. And it is that bit about, all I'm here to do is to invite you to this experience. And I will say things like, so we are going to work on, like, when it's a parents thing, one of the things I say is, we're actually going to explore the difference between being a parent and being the CEO of the family. And the difference is, a CEO often, they make difficult decisions. As a parent, you have to do that. And there's a difference between being your child's friend and being the CEO of the family. And also, for me, my own opinion is, when it comes to being a parent, rule 101 is monkey see, monkey do. How you show up as a parent, how you behave as a parent, you give your child license to do exactly the same. So there's a massive bit of self-reflection. Massive bit.
So just on that, because I think we maybe jumped ahead a little.
Often do.
No, it's fine. But you just need to bring it back a wee bit, Mark. And that we've, over the last couple of years got to know you personally and professionally, which has been a wonderful journey, Mark. Wonderful, especially meeting the kids. Your wife knows so much. I'm only kidding, Laura.
If she was here.
I am only kidding. No, it's been an absolute joy, I have to say. And reading your book, I found brilliant, actually. I really loved the insights in it, and in all seriousness, if guys, do yourself a favour and get on Amazon and get Mark's book, because there's lots of brilliant content, not just about Mark's journey in there, but kind of how to deal with the roller coaster of life and the obstacles that hits you. And there's a lot of good advice in there for having that kind of toolkit to take stuff on. And the great thing for me in it you don't take yourself too seriously in any way, shape or form, which is, even when you're dealing with this, with the big stuff. So I have to say it is fantastic. But that brings us nicely, I think, onto the collaboration that we are going to undertake in 2025 between the Catherine McEwan Foundation and yourself with the Best of You programme. Now, today I want to talk about the first thing that we're going to do and touch on the other two programmes that we're going to do. So we're going to do 3 programmes in 2025, and the first programme is going to be for parents.
Yep.
So tell us about the programme. No, don't give too much away.
Yeah, I think that, do you know, one of the things is, I'll tell you as much as I can about the programme, but I'll be bluntly honest just now, right? And this is that I run around about 36 programmes every single year. That's what my energy allows me to do without overdoing it. And it's a mix of whether it's with kids, adults, staff, all that kind of stuff. If I was to show you a video right now of what 36 programmes looks like in a year, they're all completely different. So there's stuff that I'll share, there is tools that I will share and practice, and people will take them away with them and use them accordingly. But the other part of it is, until I meet the parents, I don't entirely know what I'm going to do. Now, I'm not being deliberately vague when I say that, because what I will say about the parents programme is how this has come about with our kind of, partnership, relationship, and what the collaboration is. I've been, Laura and I and the kids have been at a number of Catherine McEwan events, and there is commonalities in the conversations we have. There are patterns of requests, worries and anxieties that I hear in these days. And we went to the one at M&D's, where Vicky was kind of hosting it, and there was lots of different tables and stuff like that, and there was questions, and we were we spoke with, Laura and I sat with some incredible families that were all at different stages in their journey of this. But when you start to, if I take a step back as a parent from that for a moment, and I listen to the feedback around the room, one of the words that comes up, two things that come up is, one is, I just need a bit of support. Now, there's a tone of exasperation in it. There's a tone of exhaustion in it. There's a massive tone of worry and anxiety. And the second thing that comes up is mental health, and that is mental health of the children, but the mental health of the adult.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest things of this programme, and it's because I've been doing the parents programme for so long, is when you equip parents with some really powerful self-measured tools, which are about, believe it or not, you can have an influence over your own anxiety. You can actually begin to put the work in to control your levels of worry. Now, I have never ever met a parent that hasn't said to me, there's certain things that I don't want to pass on to my kids. Now, we will all have behaviours. I have behaviours categorically that I don't want to pass on to Josh and Olivia. I've also got the polar opposite. There's things about myself which I do quite like that I would like them to pick up on, and I'd say the same of Laura and of other parents. So with this programme, the first thing is an invite. It's they'll be there off their own volition. It's because they want to be there, and they will be curious. They will have a level of anxiety. The anxiety that they have about the programme will drop on the first day. That's important, because they will realise very, very quickly that it's been delivered by a human being. And I mean that in the sense of, I am not belittling this, but I'm not coming from an academic research background, although I do have research and with everything that I've done. But I'm not standing up there offering them an expert one size fits all.
Yeah.
It's why the conversations the very first day, which is what is going on for you. Now, there is people that have said to me before, when I've put out something like this, or when I've delved into a new programme, people will say things like, what qualifies you to do something like this? What qualifies you to say this as a parent or someone that's been through this? And if I could go through credentials, I could go through what my training is, my background and stuff like that, but it's why that last bit, probably the best definition of what I do, and I'm not underplaying it, but when you talk about being a storyteller, it's real life stuff, but the storyteller then comes with that bit about being a practitioner. And actually, if you tell me that you've got worry, and you do, and as a parent of someone with IBD, and you're the same, and you're saying, I just don't want them to be affected by my levels of worry, I want them to live their life, I'm kind of going, well, that's great, because you're taking charge of that. But actually, what you are going to have to do is to learn to look after yourself as much as you look after your child, because you will not be able to create conditions for them to heal if you're in this constant state of worry. So parents will leave this programme. They will know how to break that chain of passing stuff down. I've been doing this for a very long time, so I say that with confidence. I couldn't tell you how I do it just now because I can't just go in a nutshell. It's something that happens over the days of the programme. But by the end of it, when they leave, they will have skills and tools, and they will absolutely be able to put this stuff into practice.
Yeah.
They will also, what answers that first bit of the question is that they will learn how to listen to each other in a very different way, and they will learn that actually you don't always need to offer. You need to create conditions to allow your kids to come to their own conclusions of things. Depending on what age they are, you will always have that kind of influence, but you need to have a partnership with them as well as a child-parent relationship.
Yeah. No, I think for me it's something that's super, super exciting, the parent stuff, because I mean we've been doing this for 20 odd years, but bringing people together and bringing families together, and it's always directed at, when we're doing the paediatric stuff, it's always directed at the kid that's living with the condition. But you're seeing these parents at different levels, and different levels of anxiety and freaking out, and they're a bit lost, and nobody's really helping them. So this is a real good place to be, where we can start to put a programme of support in that's very much directed at them, and I'm really, really excited about it. I know that the team at the Catherine McEwan Foundation is really excited about it as well. And
I'm as well. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, that's good that we're all excited about it then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know this is going out before Christmas, so the registration will be open at catherinemcEwanfoundation.com, where you can register for the programme that will be February, March.
Yeah, we'll get dates out.
February, March. So those dates will be out. They'll be out when this goes out. So
yeah,
we'll definitely have that. I'll just touch on the other two programmes over the year. Will be directed at teenagers.
Yes, so there'll be one for, it will likely be, I think age-wise, we'll do a 16 plus and a 14 and a 16 and under, just because the narrative changes a wee bit.
Absolutely, different people.
The younger ones, they also haven't fully kind of developed certain coping mechanisms yet, so there's a different side to that.
Yeah.
It's slightly more, there's a lot of challenges and activities that are doing it, which means they can put it into content and understand it a bit better. The 16-year-olds, you're dealing with a whole bunch of stuff around mental health. You're also dealing with hormones. You're dealing with relationships. And anxiety at that age is definitely more profound. So there's a huge mental health aspect to all of it, but slightly more in that one.
Yeah, again, we'll look forward to that, and more information will be out there. I'm going to finish up with a few things. We do a quick fire thing at the end of the Gutsy Podcast when I can remember to do it. Forgot a couple, to be honest with you, but hey ho, we're all
human.
Shit hams. Quick fire. 3 top tips for living with inflammatory bowel disease.
3 top tips. If you can, I suppose the first one for me is work on how you react to it. If you can, that's a practice thing, and what I mean by that is, if you're living with it and you're going through a period of being healthy and you start to have symptoms, it's not always going to be the way it was the last time. Sometimes it will be, but your reaction to it is so important. So part of it is when you can learn to self-regulate, and there is so many, whether that's about meditation, breathing, whatever your thing is, exercise, whatever it is don't always immediately let it take over. Sometimes it will though, and I fully understand that. But if you can realise that you have more control than you think, and it's a really important thing just to be able to kind of work on how you react to it.
I like that. Gives it another one.
You use everything that's at your disposal. Be okay throwing everything at it. So call the doctor when you need to. Never miss an appointment. Make sure that you if a doctor is telling you to take medicine, they're taking it based on evidence of what they've seen in your bloods or how you present. So absolutely take it. But the other side of that, and listen to them. Also question them if you don't think it's right
Yeah.
for you. Be okay, question them. The flip side of that is do everything that you can to make sure that whatever you're taking is going to work. So if you get joy, comfort and pleasure out of having a 2-hour bath or an extra hot shower or a cold shower for that matter, whatever it is, make sure that what you're doing to your body is making your body the best condition to be receptive of what's taking it. So if you want to quieten your mind and not think about this, then absolutely learn meditation, practice mindfulness. There are a million apps out there. There's so many things you can do, but absolutely merge both the Eastern and Western cultures, because you're absolutely stacking the odds in your favour.
I think that's a great one. Stacking the odds, using everything at your disposal, and if you don't, if you're not aware of everything, find out, speak to people.
Yeah.
One more. As a parent, know that this too shall pass. There's a quote that we hear a lot said by a lot of people, but know that this too shall pass. Sometimes it will last. It will feel like it's going on for ages, but there will come a time, and I say that from evidence of myself and lots of people I've spoke to, lots of people that have been through this. But we know that IBD and chronic conditions are with us for life, but they're not always good. We know the peaks and troughs of it, and we play our part in how and how that is and how we look after ourselves. But the bit for me is when you're sitting next to them and your child's having an infusion, or if you're sitting next to them, as Laura and I have been, when your child is having to take morphine in the middle of the night in the hospital to manage that, it does pass. So, and an example of that for me is, Laura and I have sat, Laura's been at, almost all of Olivia's infusions and procedures and stuff. I have been at a few of them. But I know when I'm sitting there, the one thing that I do tell myself, and a very specific thing, I have a picture of my head of lying there with Olivia in the hospital bed and wondering where are we going to go with this. And I'll fast forward to last night when she comes bursting out of the studio going, guess what I did tonight? Because it passes. And this is the thing about, it's the seasons of life, it's the cyclical thing. So I've said this at the beginning of this podcast, I've said it in the middle, and I'll say it at the end. Whatever we're looking for, we will find. Now I know where Josh is at right now is a challenge, and it's a worry, and it's a whole bunch of stuff. I have no doubt that next year Josh and I will be heading down to Comic-Con to go to, down to Liverpool to go and do Comic-Con. I have no doubt that the four of us next month will be standing at the Callum Beattie gig, and it's just that bit of knowing that it's going to pass. And you have to focus on that. You have. It's not that you have to believe it. It's true. Everything in life is temporary. Everything. But you have to decide what you're going to focus on. Yeah, I think that's absolutely sound advice. Mark Brown, that's been absolutely fantastic to have you on the Gutsy Podcast. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I think it's been brilliant for so many reasons to hear your lived experience with inflammatory bowel disease, personally and as a parent. A little bit of insight into your Best of You programme, and a little bit about your professional life, but also that's something that I'm super excited about having you on board next year, and hopefully far beyond that. To help more of our community. So thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You too. Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.